All right, 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 all right. Hello, 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 hello. Let's go ahead and get rid of the music and get rid of starting now screen. And there's me. Hi, hello. Waiting for the lag. I mean, not lag. It's not lag. Well, I mean, I guess it is input lag, or it's it is what it is. I don't know. We are back. So today the plan is to just finish off Destination Void. Do 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 do. Delay. That's the word I'm looking for. Damn it. um. Borrow. Fortify. Yeah. Do 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 dum 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 dum. Nightbot, there you are. Don't forget, follow Japan Spits on YouTube for doing most likely Helldivers, but he's a variety streamer. He's done Storm Chasers Roblox, he's done Minecraft, he's done Call of Duty, although I think he's retiring Call of Duty, is what he said. Where were we? Chapter 12 or 13? I think it was 13, right? We finished chapter 12. Okay, and we got our tea, our liberty. We still got to do some Helldivers to get that freaking warp thing, warp pack. But that's for another day. Today we shall get through this. We're going through the whole freaking thing. We're not stopping because otherwise it's gonna be like a 10-minute stream to finish it up, and that's stupid. All right, are we here? We're here. Um, full screen for please. Thank you. Appreciate you. Da, 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 da. Okay, that's right. They're trying to figure out their options, right? All right, should we just do chapter 12 again? Maybe we should just meow 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 meow. Suppose we start with chapter 12 again. All right, here we go. And well, actually, let me finish this. It's gonna be better for my voice if I finish this cup of tea. It always helps. What are the commands we got for you? Pretty sure this one exists here. Yep. Oh, meow, meow, meow. Oh, what song was I practicing? What's it called? Station of Adam, right? Da dum 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 da dum 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 da dum da dum da dum da dum 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 da dum da 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 dum dum da 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 dum dee 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 dee. Man, I can't believe that Tamagotchi Paradise is already out and freaking everywhere else except the US, which is fine, whatever, no big deal having to wait. But man, everyone else having fun with it. It's that SpongeBob meme inside, it's like Squidward's. It's gonna be so good when it finally comes out. Tamagotchi Paradise, everyone is having so much fun with it. They're saying it is definitely the device to have. All right, chapter 12, Demand. Define God, OMC. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Demand. How can a God contain the universe? OMC. Study the hologram. The individual is both laser and target. Fragment from message capsule number 4, thought to have originated with flattery, number 4B model. In Com Central, the sounds were those the umbilicus crew had come to accept as normal. The creak of action couches in their gimbals, the click of an occasional relay as it called attention to a telltale on the big board. Has Bickle unburdened himself at all about the artificial consciousness project back at the UMB? Prudence asked. She removed her attention momentarily from the master console, glanced at Flattery, her sole companion on the lonely watch. Flattery appeared a bit pale, his mouth drawn downward in a frown. She returned her attention to the console, noting on the time log that her ship watch had little more than an hour yet to run. The strain was beginning to drag at her energy reserves. Flattery was taking a hell of a long time to answer, she thought, but he was famous for the ponderous reply. He said a little, Flattery said, and he glanced at the hatch to the computer maintenance shop where Bickle and Timberlake were working. Prue, shouldn't we be listening in on them, making sure they... Not yet, she said. They wouldn't have to know we were listening. You underestimate Bickle, she said. That's about the worst mistake you can make. He's fully capable of throwing a trace meter onto the communications, as I have, just on the off chance something interesting will turn up, like finding us listening. Do you think he's started building? Mostly preparation at this stage, she said. They're collecting material. You can pretty well follow their movements by watching the power drain here on the board. The shifts in temperature sensors and the dosimeter repeaters in the drain on the robot's cargo handlers. They've been out into the cargo sections? One of them has. Probably Tim. You know what Pickle said about the UMB attempt? Flattery asked. He paused to scratch an itch under his chin. Said the biggest failure was inattention, the experts wandering away, doing everything but keeping their attention on the main line. That's a little too warm for comfort, she said. He may suspect, Flattery said, but he can't be certain. There you go, underestimating him again. Well, at least he's going to need our help, Flattery said, and we'll be able to tell what's going on from how he needs us. Are you sure he needs us? He'll have to use you for his deeper math analysis, Flattery said. And me, well, he's going to be plowing through the von Neumann problem before he gets much beyond the first steps. He may not have faced that yet, but he'll have to when he realizes he has to get deterministic results from the unreliable hardware. She turned to stare at him, noting the faraway look in his eyes. How's that again? He has to build with non-living matter. So what? She returned her attention to the board. Nature makes do with the same stuff. Living systems aren't living below the molecular level. And you underestimate life, Flattery said. The basic elements Pickle has to use are from our robot stores. Reels of quasi-biological neurons and solid-state devices, Narex wire and things like that, all of it non-living at a stage far above the molecular. They're fine structures as relevant to their function as any living matter is. Perhaps you're beginning to see the essential hubris in even approaching this problem, Flattery said. Oh, come off that, Chaplain. We're not back in the 18th century making Van Kouten's wonderful duck. We're tackling something much more complex than primitive automata, but our intention is the same as Valkansen's. That's absolutely not true, Prudence said. If we succeeded and took our machine back to the Valkansen's time and showed it to him, he'd just marvel at our mechanical ability. You missed the mark. Poor Valkansen would run for the nearest priest and volunteer for the lynch mob to do away with us. You see, he never intended to make anything that was really alive. It's only a matter of degree, not basic difference, she protested. He was like Aladdin rubbing the lamp compared to us, Flattery said. And even if his intentions were the same as ours, he wasn't aware of it. You're talking in circles. Am I really? This is the thing that writers and philosophers have skirted for centuries with their eyes half averted. This is the monster out of folklore, Prue. This is Frankenstein's poor monster and the sorcerer's apprentice. The very idea of building a conscious robot can only be faced if we recognize the implicit danger that we may be building a golem that'll destroy us. In your off hours, you tell ghost stories. Laughter's as good a way as any of facing this fear, he said. You're really serious, she accused. Never more serious. Why do you suppose Project's so happy to send us far out into space to do our work? She tried to swallow in a dry throat. Realized she was afraid. Flattery had touched a nerve. He had produced a powerful truth from somewhere. She forced herself to face this as a fact when she felt an urge to call the computer shop and beg Bickle and Tim to stop whatever they were doing. The urge sent a chill along her spine. Where do we draw the line between what's living and what's inanimate? Flattery asked. He studied her, seeing the fatigued shadows under her eyes, the trembling of nerve at her temple. Will our creature be alive? She cleared her throat. Wouldn't it be wouldn't it be more to the point to ask if our creature will be able to reproduce itself? If there's any danger, any real danger to then indeed we may be on forbidden ground, and he wondered why this thought always brought such an empty feeling in the pit of his stomach. Oh, for God's sake, Raj, Prudence was vehement. Have you completely forgotten that you're a scientist? For God's sake, I can never forget it, he said. For God's sake, I can never forget it, he said quietly. Stop that. She realized her voice unconsciously had assumed the peremptory tone of her dormitory mother back in the UMB creche. Dormitory mother, a gray-haired image whose touch was never more than a padded flexor of a robot, which she directed from some remote sanctuary in Project Central. Such a sad woman she'd been, so cynical and remote. Religion makes demands that can't be denied unless you're willing to pay a terrible price, Flattery said. Religion's just a fact like any other, Prue countered. We investigate primitive religions. Why can't we investigate our own? Didn't God make us curious? Aren't we as scientists supposed to put ourselves beyond the reach of prejudice? Only a fool imagines he's beyond the reach of his prejudices. Well, I prefer to be a Calvinist. I'm willing to be damned for the greater glory of God. You mustn't say such things, he snapped. He put a hand to his head, thinking, I mustn't let her goad me this way. You can't show me anything I mustn't say, she said. You claim scientists can equate God with ideas of mathematical infinity. We manipulate mathematical infinity. Why can't we manipulate God? What silly pretensions, he said. Mathematical infinity, zeros over zero, eh? Or infinity minus infinity, or infinity times zero. God times zero, she said. Why not? You're the mathematician, he said, his voice pouncing. You know better than anyone that these are indeterminate forms. Mathematical nonsense. God minus infinity. Mathematical nonsense. He glared at her. His throat felt dry and burning. She tricked him into this corner. It was blasphemy, and he was more vulnerable than she was. Guiltier. You're supposed to be doing this to me, aren't you? He accused. You're supposed to push me and test me. Give me no peace. I know. How little he knows, or even suspects, she thought. Infinity doesn't follow the conditions of number or quantity. If there's a God, I don't see why he should follow those conditions either. As for testing you, horseradish. All you need is an occasional kick in the philosophy. Stick to my preaching and let you play with the math. Is that it? There's no blasphemy in developing a new kind of calculus or any other new tool to deal with our universe, she said. Our universe? Flattery asked. As much of it as we can take, she said. That's the whole idea of a colony ship, isn't it? Is it? He asked. She adjusted the coarse constant repeater, said, I'll stick to math. How about a calculus that goes beyond the limits of x over y as they tend toward infinity? That should be possible. Creating a new kind of calculus and building this living sentient creature aren't the same, he said. Without the calculus, we may never achieve the creature. She keeps trying to corner me, he thought. Why? The issue is whether we're intruding on God's domain of creation. You holy Joes are all alike. You want to glorify God, but you limit the means. Flattery stared at the curved gray metal of the bulkhead above him, seeing the tiny imperfections in the crackle pattern of its finish. He felt he was being maneuvered. She was stalking him the way that a man might stalk a game. Was it his soul she was after? He sensed he was in profound danger, that the idea of consciousness as something they could create might inflict itself on his soul as an incurable wound. He put a hand to his mouth. Cannot permit her to bait me and tempt me. Raj, she whispered, and there was terror in her voice. Raj, Like something like that, right? Raj, Raj. He whirled toward her, seeing the streaks of light across the big board like red knife slashes. We're almost at redline temperatures in Sector C8 of the hype tanks, she said. Everything I do seems to make the system oscillate. Flattery's hands flashed out to the life system's repeater switches, brought his own monitors alive. He scanned the instruments, commanded, "Call Tim." "Nothing I do seems to work," she panted. He glanced at her, thought she was fighting the board, not working with it. "Call Tim," he said. She hit the command circuit switch with the heel of her left hand, shouted, "Tim to Com Central! Emergency!" Again, Flattery scanned his instruments. There appeared to be 3 points of temperature shift outside the hype tanks, with corresponding variation inside. As Prue tried to compensate for one fluctuation, the others fell farther toward the red. He had to force himself to keep his hands off the controls. If tank temperature went into the red without the high precautions, there'd be death among the helpless occupants. Despite Prue's desperate efforts, death was approaching 3 sectors of the C8 tank. Some 400 human lives in there. The hatch from the computer shop banged open. Timberlake leaped through with Bickle right behind. "Hype tanks," Prudence gasped. "Temperature." Timberlake threw himself across Comp Central into his action couch. His vac suit rasped against the cocoon lips as he turned and grasped the traveler controls. "Give me the red switch," he snapped. "To hell with the count. I'm taking it." And he took it, the big board swinging across much too fast. "C8," she said, sinking back and wiping perspiration from her forehead. "I've got it," he said. He scanned the dials and gauges, his fingers playing over the console. Bickle slipped into his own couch, tipped his repeaters. "It's in the hull shielding," he said. "First 2 layers," Timberlake said. Prudence put a hand to her throat. Tried not to look at Bickle. He mustn't suspect our attentions on him, she thought. Then, wouldn't it be a monstrous irony to lose our colonists and burden ourselves with guilt before the need for it? "That's doing it," Bickle said. She looked across the board above Timberlake and saw the warning telltales winking out, the dials swinging back into normal range. "Faulty feedback for a patch of our shell reflectors focused on C8, Timberlake said. "The system started to oscillate, and that through the overload switches left us wide open." "Another design failure," Bickle sneered. And such a simple problem, Bickle thought. The whole curve acted like a lens to focus energy within the ship, unless reflector and shell shielding systems compensated. Prudence traced the line of the remaining telltales. "C8's on a line with that robot stores section you raided. Is that all it takes to throw the ship off balance? Gives you a wonderful feeling of confidence in the Tin Egg's design, doesn't it?" Bickle said. "They didn't warn me," she thought. "They cheated, calculated emergencies, they said, just enough to keep a fine edge on your reaction abilities. Reaction abilities." "You overcompensated, Prue," Timberlake said. "Make minimal adjustments to avoid oscillation while you hunt for the source of your trouble. You had sensor telltales flaring right out through the ship to the pinpoint where you needed shielding reinforcement." I panicked, she thought. "I guess I let myself get too tired." Even as she spoke, she sensed how lame the excuse sounded. I was too intent doing the job on Flattery, she thought. I had him headed for a nice corner where he'd have to fight his way out, and I missed the ship's trouble until it was almost ready to wreck us. It occurred to her then to wonder if one of the other crew had her as a special product, to keep her abilities toned up, on edge. "Prue, you've got to remember that when the overload switches go, the computer automatics are out of the circuit," Pickle said. "This thing was designed to be brought back into line by conscious intelligence, one of us, or an OMC." "Oh, shut up," she flared. "I made a mistake, I know it. I won't do it again." "No damage was done," Timberlake said. "I don't need you to defend me," she snapped. And she thought, no damage, nothing was harmed except one of the crew. Me. She pressed her hands together to still their trembling. "We're sitting ducks for any real emergency. We can't turn back without the risk of a runaway dive into Sol or becoming another of her wandering comets. We can't go on unless we solve the unsolvable." "Take it easy, Prue," Flattery soothed. "We'll probably put you on the big board too soon after getting you out of Hybe." Thanks for the excuse, she thought. Flattery glanced around the room, seeing the poised silence of Bickle and Timberlake, both of them scorched by Prue's anger. Bickle slid out of his couch, secured a set of test leads in the clip at his left shoulder. A multimeter could be seen protruding from his breast pocket. Timberlake was refining the hull temperature adjustments, putting the system back into the computer circuits. Flattery returned to his attention to Prudence. He shouldn't have panicked, he thought. Not the type. She has a woman's wide perspective and confidence in her intuition. She should be better at the big board than any of us. Is she under greater strain? Does she know something I don't? The things that Flattery doesn't know that he doesn't know. Chapter 13, the next. So tasty. Don't forget to stay hydrated, chat. Meow meow meow. Meow 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 meow. Something like that, right? Chapter 13. We understand synergy to mean the fortuitous working together of a set of components which we have assembled in our attempts to achieve artificial consciousness. Working together, the components produce more than Prudenslan Wagened, incomplete segment from message capsule. Prudenslan Wagened, the number 3 from the third experiment. It required almost 20 minutes for Prudence to regain her composure. By that time, Timberlake had run a checklist survey on every hype tank complex. He did it with a compulsive determination that none of them misunderstood. His function as life systems engineer had been ignited. Flattery let the thing run its course, and a bit longer. Bickle was fretting to get back to his work, but Timberlake needed his role reinforcement, and Prudence needed recovery time. Bickle finally had enough waiting. Can we get back to work? He demanded. I can take the board now, Tim, Flattery said. Timberlake studied his instruments. Okay, on the count. They shifted the board, and Timberlake sat up, a sharp ache across his back, telling him how tense he had been. Let's get back to the shop, Bickle said. How far along are you? Prudence asked. Barely beginning, Bickle said. Let's get cracking. Is a man just a machine's way of making another machine? She asked. It's like Sam Butler's hen, Timberlake said. Philosophy 1. Philosophy some other time, huh? Bickle suggested. Philosophy some other time, huh? Bickle suggested, because he's annoyed. He's just ready to go. Just a minute, she said. By attempting to reproduce an artificial consciousness, we're monkeying with variation of variability. Now, there's a field that all good little divines, she nodded toward Flattery, and most scientists have agreed by a compact of silence, is the exclusive territory of God in heaven and God's handiwork on earth. The genes. Yeah, Bickle said. That's great. Let's solve it some other time. You still don't get it. None of you, she said. Bickle glared at her. Don't I? Okay, Prue, let's strip off the fancy verbiage. We're damned if we solve this problem and dead if we don't. Is that what you're trying to say? Bravo, she said, and turned to look at Flattery. Can never underestimate Bickle. Flattery scowled at his board, pointedly ignoring her. You see, Raj? She asked. She can't possibly know my instructions, Flattery thought. She might guess, but she can't know, and certainly she couldn't stop me if I had to blow us all to Kingdom Come. Because if you remember, if he receives the orders, it's his job to go ahead and blow the whole ship to Kingdom Come, as he said. In his room, does she know that there exists a switch to activate a bomb? He suspects no, but we don't know because maybe she does. It seems like she knows more than he believes. Well, I guess yeah. And then she doesn't even know. There may be somebody who's working on her her project to keep them sharp, to keep them on task, I suppose. Meanwhile, it's all a Truman show. They're all after Bickle. They need Bickle's big brain to solve this problem. So funny. It's so sad. They're trying to create a monster jet. A freaking monster. Yes, I see, Flattery said. Don't underestimate John Lon Bickle. I told you. The sound of his name, Bickle's head came up. He stared at Flattery's profile, seeing the way the man's sensitive fingers moved like spider legs across the big board. You're so very clever, Raj, she said, and so damn stupid. That's enough of that, Bickle snapped, turning to glare at Prudence. We'd better to clear a little air here. We're on our own, Prue. You have no idea how much on our own we are. We have to depend on each other because we sure as hell can't depend on the tin egg. We can't afford to snap and bite at each other now. Or we can't afford to snap and bite at each other. Oh, can't we now, she thought. We're trapped on a ship that contains only one top drawer mechanism, Bickle said. We've only one thing that functions smoothly and beautifully the way it should, our computer. Everything else works as though it had been designed and built by 6 left-handed apes. Bickle thinks this was all deliberate, Timberlake said. Designed like this for a reason. Prudence caught herself in an involuntary glance at Flattery, forced her attention away from Bickle and onto Timberlake. This is far too early for Bickle to suspect, she thought. Timberlake avoided her eyes. He looked like a small boy who'd been caught stealing jam. Flattery broke the silence. Deliberate? He asked. Yeah, Timberlake said. He thinks the other 6 ships had the same kind of failure. Something rotten with the OMCs. Ah! Bickle's far more alert and suspicious than anyone suspected, Prudence thought. Raj or I will have to side with him. There's no other way to keep control of the situation. Why The OMCs, Flattery asked. Let's not tiptoe around it, Pickle said. The thing's obvious. What feature of these ships is never mentioned in the stress analyses? What feature do we assume is proof against failure? Surely not the OMCs, Flattery said. He tried to hold his voice to a bantering level, failed, and thought, God help us, Pickle's seen through the sham far too soon. Certainly the OMCs, Pickle said, and they give us 3 of the damn things, 1 in service and 2 for backup. Never a hint that an OMC could fail, yet we had 3 on the tin egg. Why? Prudence asked. To make damn sure we got beyond the point of no return before we got the cold turkey treatment, Pickle said. Guess I'm elected, Prudence thought. So yeah, so they have to get into space. They have to get to a certain point, and now they're on their own, and they need to create an actual intelligence instead of just a brain in a jar, which is probably what they were given with these OMCs. These brains in the jars that just want to die. I guess they killed themselves, right, or something. And so it's up to Bickle to figure out this problem, and if he doesn't, or if he solves it the wrong way, I guess. The command is what was the command? The moon base needs to send back the command. Pass point or something. Turn back. I think it's something about turning back, and that's when Flattery knows to abort the mission and destroy them all, which is what happened in the last one, I believe. So yeah, they need to be out there in the middle of space so that whatever happens with this artificial consciousness, maybe it was Bickle, maybe the original Bickle on Earth is disappeared with the island. Remember the island? There was an island that disappeared because they did this experiment before there. That's why they've moved it to the outer skirts of the solar system on a false mission to Tau Ceti, which there's nothing there. There's nothing there, chat. Which is really interesting. I think we ever learn these things because the Pandora sequence is something else entirely. This is merely the inciting incidents here. The rest of it doesn't happen without this. Oh my god. I guess I'm elected, Prudence thought. She said, more of Project Goddamn Maneuvering. Sure, be right in character. Flattery shot a startled look at her, returned his attention to the big board before Bickle noticed. Cold turkey, Bickle said. The ship's one elaborate simulation device with a single purpose, and my guess is the others were the same. Why? Flattery demanded. Why would they do such a thing? Can't you see it? Bickle asked. Don't you recognize the purpose? It casts its shadow over everything around us. It's the only thing that makes any sense out of this charade. Charade. The secrecy, the mystery, the maneuvering, everything's calculated to put us on a greased slide into a very special ocean. It's not just cold turkey. It's sink or swim, and the only way we can swim is to develop an artificial consciousness. Then why such an elaborate sham? Flattery asked. Why all the colonists, for example? Why not the colonists? Bickle countered. Ready replacements for any members of the crew slaughtered on the way? Another arrow in the quiver, just in case we do get over the hump to a habitable planet where we can plant the seed of humankind? And maybe there's another reason. What? Prudence demanded. Remember, if Bickle had died, there was always someone else that they were going to unfreeze as well. And they just weren't, they were second best. Bickle is number one. Bickle is the guy. Bickle is the one who's going to solve this problem. He's the main character, y'all. What? Prudence demanded. I can't say just yet, Bickle said. It's just a hunch, and there's something a hell of a lot more important we have to consider. The destructive potential of this project. You better explain that, Flattery said, but he could feel in the dryness of his throat and mouth that Bickle already had seen through to the horror elements of Project Consciousness. Let's not kid ourselves, Bickle said. If we really solve this, the whatever you call it we developed could be a kind of ultimate threat to humankind. A rogue, Frankenstein's monster, cold intelligence without warm emotions, and angry horror. He shrugged. Once there was an island in Puget Sound. You all know about it. What happened? Did they solve it? So we installed inhibitions, failsafe features, Prudence said. How? Bickle asked. Can we develop this consciousness without giving it free will? Maybe that was the original problem with our creator, giving us consciousness without permitting us to turn against what? God? Consciousness, the gift of the serpent, Flattery thought. He wet his lips with his tongue. So this ship has an ultimate failsafe device to protect Earth and the rest of humanity, Bickle said. The only sure one I can think of, given all the variables, is a human being, one of us. He looked at each of them. One of us set to pull the pin and blow us all to hell if we go sour.
He figured it all out. Oh, come now, Flattery said. Could be you, Bickle said. Probably is, but maybe you're too obvious. Prudence put a hand to her breast and thought, Holy Jesus, never once considered that. But Bickle's right. And it's Raj, of course. He's the only one that fits. What do I do now? Oh my god. All of it unraveled in a second. All of their meticulous planning. They hoped to have control over this thing, but there's no way they have control over it now. It's all in Pickle's hands. It goes the way that he wants it. Because he could incapacitate Flattery, Raj, and so that would give him even more time to deal with whatever this problem is, to solve the issue of artificial consciousness. Timberlake stirred out of a deep silence. He had heard the arguments, and the only thing that surprised him was how easy it was to accept Bickle's summation. Why was Bickle right? He was right, of course, but why did they accept it when the thing wasn't really that obvious? Was it of Bickle, clearly the strongest mind among them? Or was it that they already knew the facts, unconsciously? Tell you something, Timberlake said. Bickle's right, and we know it. So one of us is set to pull the pin. I don't want to know who. No argument, Bickle said. Whoever it is, if this thing goes sour, I'd be the last person in the tin egg to stop him. Because it could be a monster. It could be a Frankenstein's monster. Chat. Chapter 14. 1, 2, 3. The Zen master tells us that an omnipresent idea can be hidden by its own omnipresence. The forest lost among the trees. In our normal daily behavior, we are most estranged, most in the grip of an illusory idea of the self. Every enchanting inclination of pride and its ego, of convention and its master, social training, conspires to maintain the illusion. The semanticist calls it the inertia of old premises, and this is what holds our analysis of consciousness within fixed limits. She wrote, Prudence Lawn Wagand at the foot of the long tape, started it rolling through the auto recorder, made the synchronous shift to Flattery's tape as he took over the board. The counter said it was her 35th change of the shift. Flattery squirmed in his couch, setting himself for the 4-hour watch. Reflections on the dial faces were hypnotic. He shook his head to bring himself to full alertness, heard the hiss of fabric as Prudence got out of her couch. She stood there for a moment, stretching, did a dozen deep knee bends. How easily they accept the possibility that I'm executioner, Flattery thought. I wonder why. He noted how wide awake and alert Prudence appeared. This 4 hours on, 4 hours off routine could be endured as long as no serious problems arose, but it played hob with the metabolic cycle. Prudence should be headed for food and rest, but she obviously was wide awake. She glanced at Flattery, saw he settled in for the watch, checked the repair log. Nothing was flagged urgent. That made it a bit more than 25 hours with nothing more than minor adjustments on the big board. Smooth. Too smooth. Danger keeps you honed to a fine edge, she thought. Extended peace makes you dull. More things that this is like all the Dune themes. But she wondered if Project had anticipated the special danger she had found for herself, and she thought, might the stick to beat not only the others, but myself? The line of her own research seemed so obvious, though. To find the chemical sea in which consciousness swam, the ultimate clue lay, she thought, in the serotonin adrenaline fractions. The thing she thought was an active principle, something between a syn helix and a noradrenaline, a flash producer of neurohormones. The end product would be the root simulator of human consciousness. Find that chemical analog, and she could give fine detail to the workings of consciousness, provide a point-to-point sequencing which they could follow with machine simulation. On the course she had chosen, the dangers to her person were enormous. She had no other guinea pig upon whom to test the derivatives her ingenuity produced. The possibility of deadly error was always present. The last substance, a relative of cohoba with an extra nitrogen addition, had ignited her mind, transported her into a weird consciousness. All sounds had become liquids which merged within her to be translated by a centrifuge process of awareness. It had been a terrifying experience, but she refused to stop. It was only possible to make. She's doing all kinds of weird drugs. It was only possible to make the tests during the deep rest periods in her own private cubby, and there was always the possibility that some physical response would betray her. She could not afford that. The others would unite to prevent the tests, she knew. Such was their conditioning. You'd better get something to eat and try to rest, Flattery said. I'm not hungry. At least try to rest. Maybe later. Think I'll wander in and see how Bickle and Tim are doing. She looked at the big screen overhead. It was turned to the peak corner lenses of the computer shop. We have to have a constant monitor on each other, Timberlake had argued. We can't wait for somebody to yell help. Green showed Bickle alone in the shop, but another eye had been keyed. It showed Timberlake asleep in his cubby adjoining the shop. 4 hours on and 4 hours off, plus this constant looking over each other's shoulders will have us batty in a week, she thought. Bickle looked up to his own screen eye, saw Prudence watching, said, Satan finds mischief for idle hands. They mock me, Flattery thought. They laugh at God, at the devil, at me. Poor guy. How about some coffee? Prudence asked, speaking to Bickle. Coffee later, he said. No more food of any kind in here anyway. We have to keep the cover plates open, and we can't risk contaminating the fine structure. If you're free, I could use some help. She took one low grav step across the hatch lock, let herself through, stopped just inside the shop to study what Tim and Bickle had accomplished since her last free period. Where the optical character reader had been on the big panel across from the lock, now stretched a mechanical excrescence, a piled and jutting structure of plastic blocks, Eng multiplier circuits, each sealed in plastic insulator. Linking the blocks were loops and tangles and twists, a black spiderweb of insulated pseudoneuron fiber. Bickle had heard her entrance. Without turning from his work at one end of the protruding angular construction, he said, Take that other microtype viewer on the bench. I need 21.006 centimeters of the KA4 neurofiber with random spaced end bulbs and multi-synapses. Connected it as I've indicated on the schematic labeled G20. It should be on top. It should be the top one in the pile on the right end of the bench. Pickle sat down on the deck, slid a new block of Eng multipliers into position. He swung a portable microtype viewer across the block, leaned into the viewer's forehead, rest, began making the connections. Yes, sir, she thought. She found the indicated schematic, reeled off the neurofiber, fed it into the viewer, bent to the eyepiece. The enlarged image of the conductor line with its green-coated synapse sections and yellow end bulbs leaped into view. She looked once more at the schematic, began making the required connections. What are we doing now, boss? She asked. Installing a system of roulette cycles, Bickle said. Why? A machine can reproduce any form of behavior, Bickle said. We can engineer this device to satisfy any given input-output specifications. It'll behave any way we want, under any specified circumstances. Raj set me straight on that. She set her tone light. That was wrong, huh? You bet your sweet life. Specified environment and behavior, that's deterministic. The manufacturer is still in control. What's worse, it requires a completely detailed memory. Everything in the machine's past has to be immediate, right there and now. Memory load gets bigger and bigger every second, and it's all present and immediate, and that throws you into an infinite design problem. She reeled off a required length of side fiber, made the loop indicated in the schematic. Infinite design. That means an indeterminate form, and by definition, the indeterminate is impossible to construct. What do we do now? Don't be dull, Bickle said. We build for a random inhibitory pattern in the net, behavior that follows probability requirements. He leaned back from his viewer, wiped perspiration from his forehead. A behavior pattern that results from built-in misfunction. The way this ship was programmed to behave for us, she thought. Deterministic behavior from unreliable elements, she said. And she sensed Flattery's hand in this, an argument, a gentle nudge. Bickle, she said, I've been stewing about your suspicions. Even if you're right about one of us being set to blow us up if we go sour, how can you be sure this failsafe person is among us? I mean, 3 of the original crew are dead. Okay, Bickle said. Let's say we brought you out of Hybe and you found our Chaplain psychiatrist had been killed. What were your orders? Orders? Come off that. We all had special orders. I have insisted we bring another Chaplain psychiatrist out of Hybe. I'd have insisted we bring another Chaplain psychiatrist out of Hybe, she said in a small voice. What would you have done? I had my orders, same as you. She looked up at Flattery visible on the overhead screen. He appeared intent on the big board, paying no attention to the conversation coming over the intercom from the shop. That was a sham, she knew. Everything said here was going into his brain, being weighed and analyzed. Bickle's right, she thought. It's Raj. Pay attention to what you're doing, Bickle said. She turned, saw him watching her. You'll foul up the ties in the loop, and I'll put you back in Hybe, he said. Oh my god. But yeah, they've all figured it out. They're all pretty smart. They all got pretty big brains on this ship. And it's all, yeah, so Bickle's just like making the connections and seeing the pattern. He's very good at noticing the patterns. That's what it is. Don't make threats you can't carry out, she said. But she turned back to the microtype viewer, finished off an interrigged series of loops, tested to be sure they weren't mutually oscillating, traced the output sheath, and attached a plug for the Eng multiplier connection. Let me have that G20 assembly as soon as you're finished, Bickle said. He yawned. Put his knuckles to his eyes. Prudence checked her assembly against the schematic, saw it matched, lifted it gently out of the viewer, and took it to Bickle. He was overdue for a rest and still driving himself, she saw. Here, she said, presenting the assembly. When you get this tied in, why don't you take a break? We're almost ready to put this on an initial program, Pickle said. He's too excited. He's all in on this project. Even though he knows the catastrophic potential of possibilities, he took the assembly and began connecting it to the nearly well, obviously because they have to save their lives too, right? Better into the unknown than death. Never give in, never surrender. He took the assembly, began connecting it to the newly installed Eng multiplier block, running one sheaf back to a plug board connection on the computer panel. Prudence stepped back, studied the mechanical growth that jutted from the wall. As though she saw it for the first time, the construction abruptly took on a new meaning for her. That's more than a setup for analysis, she said. That's right. Pickle stood up, wiped his hands on the sides of his vac suit, swung his own micromanipulator and viewer to one side. This, in addition to giving us our analysis of built-in misfunction, this little ox we're driving will provide a three-way energy interchange. You're tied into the computer, she accused, pinpointing the connections in the plug board. Every line in that board has a diode in it. Pulses can come from the computer to our test setup, but anything going into the computer has to be coded by one of us and inserted over there. Pickle pointed to the input heads lined up at the right corner of the wall. Three-way interchange? She asked. We're going to test my field theory approach. I have a source program ready to insert. If our aux doesn't work, it'll produce an unconditional transfer of the material at the readout. If the field is produced, it'll act as a filter, and we'll get a truncation. It'll pass only the significant digits. What about the roulette cycles? The zero suppresses will be intermittent, he said, but we'll still only get the significant digits at the readout. Prudence nodded, looking at Bickle with a new understanding of what he was doing. All sense data are intermittent into the human consciousness. It was an explosive thought. Waveforms. Everything which consciousness could identify had to move in some organized way. It had to move against the background which outlined the organization. Therefore, intermittence, and Pickle had seen it right through to this necessity. She found the realization somehow deeply sexual, and awareness of this filled her with disquiet. There was no way she could include anti-S on her present testing regimen. She wondered if her body might finally betray her. Forcing herself to a calmness where she did not feel, she said, what we see and identify has to be discrete and significant. It has to dance against some other background. Now you have it, Pickle said, but we assume that the one who views the data is continuous, a flow of consciousness. Somewhere inside us, the discrete becomes amorphous. Consciousness weeds out the insignificant, focuses only on the significant. That's judgment, she said, and it's where physicalist theory falls flat on its face. If this is an introspection device, then it won't be consciousness. Then it won't be conscious. Introspection confuses consciousness with thinking, but sensing, feeling, and thinking are physiological processes, and consciousness is something else, Pickle said. It's a relationship, a field, a selective interchange. It drops insignificant digits. It's a weeder. Now we see if we have the device that can weed on the basis of intermittent data, some of which is erroneous data, significant results, she whispered. What? But she ignored Pickle to turn and look at the overhead screen where Flattery was revealed, calmly monitoring the big board. Something Flattery had said came in. Something Flattery had said came now into her mind, as though it had been amplified to full volume. There's nothing concerning ourselves about which we can truly be objective, except our physical responses. The reflections of behavior. We exist in a forest of illusions, where the very concept of consciousness merges with illusion. She turned to look at Pickle, where he worked, seeing the stretch of his muscles under the vac suit fabric as he bent to finish the assembly, and she thought, to be conscious, you must surmount illusion. Pickle saw that, where I didn't. A moment of illumination filled her mind, and she saw the man at work as more than flesh and sinew and nerves, more than the physical chemistry with the blanks to be filled in. Pickle was both a minuscule and vulnerable creature, but beyond that, he contained powers that could stretch across any universe. Something of this momentary understanding struck her as almost religious, holy. She savored it, realizing this was a private and personal thing. She could never completely communicate to another creature. Pickle finished the final tie of the G20 assembly, stood up, and rubbed the small of his back. His hands trembled as he relaxed after the fierce concentration of the work he had just completed. Let's give it a run, he said. Prue, you monitor the diagnostic board. He gestured to the panel of dials and gauges waiting like so many glistening eyes at his left. I'll give each net of the roulette cycles a 1/5 second burst from the shot generator. He moved around to the right of the piled blocks of the test setup, stepping over the leads with elaborate care. He flipped the row of switches to start the source program through the inputs. Mark, he said. Mark, she said as her dial needle snapped over to register the pulse. Give me the mean synapse threshold, mean end bulb threshold, and action time on each net. Bickle depressed three switches simultaneously. Interchange activated. He waited, feeling the suspense grow, a tightness in his stomach. Interchange now, showing entrance pulse, she said. Net 1, he said, introducing the time burst from the shot generator. There's a jam up at the fifth layer nodes, she said. She concentrated on the gauges for the fifth layer as though her thoughts could activate them. But they remained at zero. No impulses are getting through, she said. I'll try sweeping the roulette cycles, Bickle said. He twisted a dial. Nothing, she said. Bickle kicked off his row of switches, moved the jacks to the left. Here, let's try a trigonometrically trigonometrically oscillating potential in the loops. Give me the new readings for each layer of the nets. Mark 1. You're getting a nonlinear reaction across all nets now, she said. It's close to zero linearity. That can't be, Bickle said. These things are still open circuits no matter what we call them. He depressed another switch. Read the other nets. Prudence suppressed a sense of frustration, swept her gaze across the dials. Nonlinear, she said. Bickle stepped back, glared at the input panel. This is nuts. What we have here is essentially a transducer. The outputs should match. Again, Prudence read her dials. Your products are still zero. Any heat? Bickle asked. Nothing significant, she said. Bickle pursed his lips, thinking, somehow we've produced a unitary orthogonal system for each net and the total assembly, he said. And that's a contradiction. It could mean we have more than one system in each of these separate nets. You have an unknown that's swallowing energy, Prudence said, her excitement kindling. Isn't that our definition of it isn't conscious, Bickle said. Whatever this unknown system is, it can't be conscious. Not yet. This setup is too simple, doesn't have enough source data. Then it's some error in the hookup, Prudence said. Bickle's shoulders sagged. He took a deep, tired breath. Yeah, has to be. Where's your record of assembly and circuit tests? Prudence asked. I isolated an auxiliary storage tank, Bickle said. He gestured vaguely to his left. It's the red flagged one. Everything's in there, including all this. He waved at the diagnostic panel. You get something to eat and take a rest break, she said. I'll start tracing circuits. You got a jam up on a direct test, Bickle said. It wasn't an open circuit reaction, and the net interchange test produces zero at the output without flagging the point of loss. The thing's a goddamn sponge. It'll be some simple error, she said. Wake Tim and send him in while you're at it. He had more than his 4 hours off. I am tired, Bickle admitted. He thought back, asking himself how long it had been since he had rested. 3 full watches, anyway. I let myself get too tired, he thought. I know better. This is exacting work. Going too long without a break is the surest way to make mistakes. Yep, haste makes waste, chat. You gotta remember. Breaks are important, too. It'll be some simple thing, he said, but he knew as he said it that this was wrong. Sleep. He needed sleep. Bickle headed towards quarters, pawing at the problem in his mind, rolling it over. The setup produced a contradictory reaction. Nothing simple was going to produce that complex contradiction. Behind him, Prudence activated the readouts at the red flagged portions of the panel, started getting the feel of the setup. Sometimes with these computer problems, she knew you could move intuitively into an area of difficulty, save yourself hours of hunting. Certain parts of a setup would feel wrong. Presently, Timberlake joined her, yawning. Vic told me. Trouble? Odd trouble. So I gathered, he cleared his throat. Exactly what happened. She told him about the tests, the jam up at the fifth layer nodes, and the subsequent disagreement between input and output. Zero linearity? He asked. Almost. And no heat? Nothing showed on the sensors. Timberlake looked at the readout, the panel on both sides. This is the storage tank we isolated. Have you examined the whole procedure? I was just getting acquainted with the setup when you came in. That thing should have worked, Timberlake said. It was a clean, straightforward construction all the way. I could have sworn it was going to give us that integrated readout, remove the non-significant digits, and we could just go on from... He paused, then said, unexpected feedback might cause the thing to react the way it did. I don't follow you. An oscillation, a flyback pulse that we didn't take into account. That might jam up the direct test, she said, but it wouldn't account for the other reaction. If you were into the computer, of course, but that's one way, isn't it? Gated all the way. Our setup could receive selected data from the computer, but nothing went back in. No, I was thinking of this storage bank here. He nodded toward the panel in front of Prudence. She turned toward the panel, puzzled. But this is just a complicated recorder. All it does is keep track of our work step by step. It is isolated from the rest of the computer, isn't it? What if it isn't isolated from the rest of the computer? Timberlake asked. But Bickle assured me. Yeah, Timberlake said, and he probably believed it. I checked the work too. If the schematics are correct, it's isolated. But what if the schematics are off? Where would they be? I don't know, but what if they are? Timberlake moved down the panel to the left, searching. He stopped at a translator output head. Easy enough to find out. I'll just sort to find out if any of that test setup go into the master banks. If it did get in, there's no telling what it loused up, she said. Not necessarily, Timberlake said. He began cutting a program tape referring to the computer banks themselves for the necessary data. Presently, he said, that should do it. Within seconds, the loading go signal flashed at the readout in front of Timberlake. He switched it for an online printout and began reading the automatic translation. That was awfully fast, Prudence said. Timberlake ignored her, scanning the tape as it chattered from the printer. For Christ's sakes, he said. What is it? She asked, suppressing an irrational surge of fear. Yep, Bickle, Timberlake said. This damn thing is giving us the truncated readout right here. What? The answer we expect to get back at the setup. If it worked, Timberlake said, we're getting it here, right now. That's impossible, she said. Sure it is, Timberlake said. You helped program this thing. Look for yourself. He whirled, brushed past her, and headed for quarters. Prudence bent over the printout, scanned the selected bits, recognizing some of the math she had worked into the program for Bickle. With a breath-stopping sense of awe, she realized that the printout was devoid of insignificant digits. It had been weeded down to the essentials. So they've got the wrong output. They got the wrong output. It's actually going to their storage device, which is like the brain. Is this thing the brain now? The brain of their creature, their monster. Cat, you learn to worship. Excuse me. Um Eminem, what? Hello. I'm just noticing. I haven't been paying attention. Oh, no, okay, it's working. But yeah, text to speech. What's going on here? Wait. Hold on. Hello. There we go. All right, it's fixed. It just was catching up with my dumb singing. All right, chapter 15. Computers are just systems with a great amount of unconsciousness, everything held in immediate memory and subject to programs which the operator initiates. The operator, therefore, is the consciousness of the computer. Rahalan Flattery, the Book of Ship, which is like interesting, like this guy does not have a number. This is the Rahalan Flattery because he's the definitive one, no numbered, and he's in the book of Ship. It was at least 5 minutes before Timberlake returned with Bickle. While she waited, Prudence ran through the experiment with a second. While she waited, Prudence ran through the experiment a second and a third time. Both tests produced the truncated readout. She felt a constricting sensation in her chest. Every sound in the room pressed in on her. Every tiny metallic click, the low humming of a timer, the faint breathing of a ventilator. She felt that this thing in front of her was something profoundly dangerous. It required her to act with a delicate care. Something new had come awake on the Earthling. The hatch slammed open behind her. Bickle pushed her aside, bent over the terminal. Let me see. His fingers flew over the keys. He scanned the readout. My God, it is. Timberlake moved up behind him, peered over Bickle's shoulder. How? Timberlake asked. Tim, Bickle directed, take the panel off that storage bank. Check it with everything we have. There has to be a line from it into the main computer somehow. a line that doesn't show on the master plan. But why would that thing start feeding us the right answer now? Prudence demanded. That, Bickle dismissed it with a wave of his hand. The program went in with a key showing what was expected. Every part of the program was worked out on the main computer. We never cleared our work. It's still in there, acting as a filter. It filtered out everything except the answer that was keyed for optimum. Hell, anybody can make a computer act like that kind of filter. It doesn't mean a thing. Not so fast, she said, excited by sudden inspiration. What do you really what do you really have over there in that test setup? She looked at the construction, which Bickle so irreverently referred to as the ox. It stood there like a surrealistic extrusion from the flat expanse of the panel. You call it a transducer of sorts, she said. What's that really mean? The thing you have there is composed of blocks of nerve set simulators arranged to integrate 3 lines of energy. The operational term is nerve net simulators. She gets too excited and she talks too much, Pickle thought. He knew this was partly he knew this was partly his fatigue thinking for him, but he felt keyed up, buoyed, and the quick discovery of what had gone wrong. Buoyed by the quick discovery of what had gone wrong. He wanted to cut the link with the computer and rerun the test. Timberlake already was removing the panel to get at the storage bank. The panel cover grated on the deck as he pushed it aside. Yeah, NerveNet simulators, Bickle said, kept his attention on Timberlake, admiring the direct, purposeful way the man went at it. Timberlake was good at his work. Prudence misread Bickle's answer, said, and what's a NerveNet built? What's a NerveNet but an embedding in space? It catches energy the way a spider web might catch ink you threw at it. The net makes a record in 4 dimensions of the energy you throw at it. Nice analogy, Bickle said. You find anything, Tim? Not yet, Timberlake said. He was on his back now, his head, arms, and shoulders into the crawl space beneath the first wiring layer of the panel to storage system. Noting where Timberlake had concentrated his attention, Bickle said, I think you're right, Tim. It's most likely to be down there with the primary sheaths. Prudence, concentrating on following her own train of thought, said, so we have a multiple embedding space, an energy catcher in 4 dimensions. The test program passes through this space as flux impulses in 4 dimensions and filters past the inhibitory roulette cycles in... How's that again? Pickle interrupted. She looked up to find him staring at her. How's what again? She asked. That about flux impulses. I said the test program passes through the embedding space as the flux impulses in 4 dimensions and filters past the inhibitory roulette. By God, you're right, Pickle said. The roulette cycles would be a filter. I never thought of it that way. You get a pileup of nodule pulses at random points in the net layers. Your test program would have to find its own path through that, canceling out at some points, but passing on wherever it had higher potential. And this filter screens the program through a system of random errors, Prudence said. So you have to be wrong about the way it produced your truncated answers. The program that got through to the computer couldn't have been anything at all like what you previously punched into the banks. Yet it produced the right answers. Let's play this over slowly, Pickle said. We have circuitry here, the aux plus computer, that should connect point events in space-time, right? Right. That's your embedding space in 4 dimensions. So we sent energy pulses through it, and those... Yo, Timberlake called, his voice echoing with a hollow resonance from the crawl space. Pickle looked down, saw that only Timberlake's feet protruded into the shop now. Found it, Timberlake said. It's a 50-line sheaf, single plug. Shall I pull it? Where does it lead? Pickle asked. According to the color code, it leads right down into the accessory storage banks, Timberlake said. His feet disappeared into the crawl space. All these banks are linked that way. Why the hell doesn't it appear on the schematics? Pickle got down on his hands and knees at the mouth of the crawl hole. Is there any kind of buffer or gating system in those lines? A handlight wavered back and forth in the crawl space. Yeah, by God, Timberlake said. How'd you know? Had to be, Pickle said. That's a computer failsafe system and something else. Don't mess with it. Why? What do you mean? Prudence asked. The recording system, Pickle said. And he had his answer to an earlier question. Would Moonbase install hidden elements in the ship plus computer system? Yes. And here was one of those hidden elements. It's the black box. It's the recording system of all the events. It's the thing that they were going to go and recover from that first mission, remember? Recording? Prudence was puzzled. Yes, he was angry. Everything the computer does, everything we do, all recorded. Why? They can recover it and analyze it even if we're not around to help. But why wouldn't they tell us about... They didn't want us questioning the purpose of this voyage until it was too late for us to change course. She was defensive. We could still go back to... Don't be dense, Prue. A one-way trip. They don't want us back. We could be very dangerous. The only useful thing we have to offer is information, discovery. Pickle rocked back on his heels, fighting a lost, sinking sensation. Those bastards, he thought. They knew we'd find this the first time we went looking into the computer's innards. They've tied our hands. Timberlake came scooting out of the crawl space, stood up. There's a cover plate down there with a red letter warning: extreme, danger, to be opened by moon-based personnel only. Does that make sense to you? I wish it didn't, Pickle said. He peered into the hole. Timberlake was as puzzled as Prudence had been. But a recorder and a fail-safe system with such that has "don't touch" written all over it, Pickle said. I guarantee you, mess with it and something really destructive happens. Don't change a damn thing. He stood up, removed the blocking plugs that they had installed to isolate their test system. His movements were wooden and poorly coordinated. Isolate! He pushed past Prudence, who still appeared puzzled. Did any of the others understand what was really happening here? The test leads clattered as he threw them onto the bench. All he'd done with his experiment was change the potential at one point and ensure that they would not have the addresses on any of the test information they had just sent into the total computer system. Timberlake followed him to the bench. But what about those results? The truncated, use your head, Bickle whirled on him. This computer has a random access system as far as we're concerned. Enormous blocks of information filed in it bit by bit in such a way that only the total computer can reproduce it for us. That's why we have so many special function routines and subroutines and sub-subroutines ad infinitum. These addresses of those we know, but the failsafe, the warning, that's a special kind of message to us, Bickle said. Prudence knew she had to head him away from this conjecture. She spoke quickly. The organic cores must have known where their information was, and they're dead, Bickle said. Get the message? Wait a minute, Timberlake said. Are you trying to tell us the computer is what keeps us alive? Bickle said. That's all that keeps us alive. We win or lose with that computer. Timberlake turned to stare at the open access panel. But we... He broke off. Prudence, seeing what Timberlake had just realized, felt her mouth go dry. Some of the information in this monster would be filed many times, depending on the power with which it had been inserted. Some information was filed just once and could be lost through the kick of a proton, and that total system controlled their destiny. This computer storage banks amount to one enormous internally balanced system, Bickle said. Prudence nodded. It was like a superb human memory in some respects, even worked something like a human memory, but it was a fine instrument with all the delicate weaknesses implied by that term. Jesus, Timberlake whispered, and we shot an unknown program through it. Worse than that, Bickle said. Because of that unrecorded tie-in to the computer, he swallowed, wondering if they had already appreciated the extent of this disaster. Turning, he indicated the piled cubes and rectangles, the sheaths of quasi-biological nerve fiber that constituted his ox. The others turned in the direction he pointed. That setup is, in effect, an extension of the computer, Bickle said. The error factor, Prudence said. She put a hand to her mouth. We've introduced an error factor into the computer, Bickle said. And that means, first, that we've introduced the probability, no, certainty, of an unknown number of subspaces within the computer's spacetime. The program we've just thrown into the computer to land, we know not where, will produce unknown topological linkages, new networks all through the system. In the memory storage banks primarily, Timberlake said, and in the transducer nets, Bickle said. But the storage unit here can produce the circuit analysis information when I asked for it, Prudence said. Certainly, Bickle said, but your demand amounted to a program for a subroutine. Where the information came from, God alone knows. Just in the first stage, there are 50 lines leading out of this unit, and those lines filter through a buffer system, remember? The bits go out here, charged through that buffer system, and are split up 50 ways according to their differences in potential. That's just the first stage. And the next stage, your division is 50 times 50, and then 50 times 50 times 50, and so on. It was like trying to work with a memory whose only certain property was that everything stored in it was stored according to a scatter pattern, and could only be recovered if you knew the pattern. Guaranteed selective amnesia. But that was kind of human. This bank here was just like a knitting machine, Prudence said. It took the threads of the record from this test setup and knitted them through the storage banks of the entire system, smearing the record across an unknown number of retainer cells. An unknown number of times, Bickle said. Remember that. And we only have one address for the entire record of that test, the address of a subroutine program. If that's lost, the whole record's lost, unless we manage to match enough pieces of it in another program to pull it out of the system again. But isn't that pretty much the way human memory works? Prudence asked. And here's another thing: if produced the right answer at the it produced the right answer at the translator, the right answer. Bickle looked at her, turning the fact over in his mind. She was right, by God. Not for the reason he had allegedly spouted. The thing had produced the right the thing had produced the right answers in spite of errors and misprogramming. The processing procedure, thank, it was heuristic, and it should not, under any circumstances, have yielded the desired output. But it had. Why? Bickle experienced a mental sensation as though his mind lurched. It was so much like a physical sensation he wondered that the others didn't notice. The beautiful clarity with which he understood what had happened in the computer washed through him like a stimulant. Didn't the others see it? He looked at Prudence, at Timberlake, realized this had all occurred in a fraction of a second. For motion produceth nothing but motion. The words rang through his mind, producing awe at the way apparently disconnected bits, a line of poetry here, a technical phrase there, could link with a simple turn of mathematics to produce the right answer in his mind, just the way it had happened in the computer. Prudence, correctly interpreting Bickle's expression, spoke quietly. You're onto something, John? He nodded. Prudence, you're a mathematician. What's pi? She stared at him, puzzled. I'm serious, Bickle said. The ratio of the circumference of the circle to its diameter, she said. A rational approximation would be approximately 22 over 7. A closer approximation would be 354 over 113. For most applications, that approximation of pi would give us significant results, Bickle asked. You don't have to ask that. You know it would. Okay, now tell me why you didn't answer my question by saying pie is a sweet concoction of starchy crust enclosing a filling, often of fruit. Saw his seriousness in the way he stared at her, waiting. This bore on the problem in some way. She looked at Timberlake, and he interpreted her motion as an appeal for help. It's obvious, Timberlake said. You set up a category first by saying, you're a mathematician. Then you asked, what's pi? You didn't say, what's a pi? Yeah, Bickle said. You had two screening references through which to filter the question and come up with the right answer. Then, because you sensed this was a rhetorical question in some way, you didn't try to explain. First, there was no rational number for pi. You just gave me the rational approximations. Well, I knew I didn't have to explain that to you, Prudence said. That was a category, common information, Bickle said. All you had to do was produce the significant answer. Holy cow, Timberlake exploded, seeing where Bickle was leading them. Holy ox, you mean, Bickle said. Prudence whirled, pointed wildly toward the computing panel. But it wasn't conscious. It couldn't have been. It wasn't conscious, Bickle agreed. But first crack out of the box, we've produced a significant result, and it was no accident. What can we say about the result of this test? First, we can say that the computer had sufficient information to produce an accurate answer despite errors in the system. Second, we can say that we introduced a new kind of sense data into the system previously called a computer. We can go on calling this a computer, but it's a leap up from a computer now. It has learned to use a new kind of sense data. Prudence started to speak, stopped. Screen everything I've said through field theory, Bickle said. He grinned at them. Then remember that we matched three energy sources in the aux. The integrator here set them up to go out identically. The buffer potential of the storage unit here has scattered those pulses through the system. They were divided and redivided, but wherever they matched, they reinforced each other. In itself, the original program pulse was a kind of comparator, Timberlake said. The computer could compare for accuracy on the basis of signal strength, and the computer already knew how to compare the AAT signals for accuracy by screening them through a node matching grid, Bickle said. Signal strength was merely another kind of grid. If you're not too busy congratulating yourself, Prudence said, consider how some of those rematched signals must have grown in strength. The probability is that some elements of this computer have been shocked out. We're still running, Bickle said, but he spoke defensively, realizing that Prudence was right. There were overload fuses throughout the filter to protect components, but stray signals overriding barrier potentials could have played hob with some of the master programs. He looked at the overhead screen, which showed Flattery scanning the comm central board. Flattery appeared relaxed but watchful, his gaze traversing the big board. Damn her, he thought. One instant, everything had been rosy, full of elation. At the aux said the elation. That at the at the aux. there's a word missing here. So the way that they scanned this book, like they didn't get the whole page, you know. Wait, no, I just had it.
zoomed in too much. Okay, we're good. One instant, everything had been rosy, full of elation. That the ox had come short up. That the ox had come a short step up the ladder, not into consciousness, but toward it. And all she could think to do was throw cold water on them. Pickle met Flattery's gaze in the screen. Have you been listening, Raj? I've been listening, Flattery said. Have you gone sour yet? Pickle asked. Do you really think I'm this hypothetical human failsafe device? Flattery asked, holding his tone to a nice balance between mockery and injured innocence. Almost goes too far, Prudence thought. If he isn't underestimating Pickle, he's pressing the limits. One course is as dangerous as the other. You're the logical candidate, Pickle said, but I was asking for your comments on progress. Flattery suppressed an abrupt feeling of jealousy. Pickle, in spite of the obvious flaw that was a gaping thing, balanced so beautifully, or he appeared to balance, which was much the same thing as far as this operation was concerned. Ah, progress, Flattery said. If I understand your original test correctly, the pulse time distances didn't check out with the space distances. They weren't proportional. That's essentially it. Pickle wondered why Flattery's tone made him feel so defensive. They averaged out to almost zero product. Their artificial nerve nets produce something vaguely equivalent to psychological space. Flattery paused, scanned the comm central board, returned his attention to the screen and Bickle. You can say that the test pulses are space, a region somewhat equivalent to what Prudence calls embedding space. I like her cobweb and ink analogy, but there's a big difference between physical space and psychological space. He let it hang there for a long time, forcing Bickle to admit a dependency upon someone else's expertise. If you're going to explain it, then get at it, Bickle said. There was anger in his voice. He didn't enjoy depending on Flattery. Okay, Flattery kept his tone even and friendly. You can time a signal across a physical space, repeat it, and get matched results. Any difference will have a positive relationship to a change in distance. But psychological space, now that's something else again. The time there could depend on mood. What's mood? John, it's a comparison between this and previous experiences of a similar kind. Your pulse time in psychological space will meet many more variables than it does in physical space. Are you saying we haven't analyzed our results correctly? Timberlake asked. He glared up at the screen, feeling that he and Prudence and Bickle were arrayed somehow against Flattery, against time. Are you saying we haven't analyzed? You're trying to arrive at some proportional comparison between the sense world and the physical world, Flattery said. But you can't use the same rules of measurement. Each neuron in your net will introduce an element of random conduction time, and you get more randomness from the similar variation in synaptic delay time. The difference between the sense world and the physical world is the difference between time distance and your space difference. This is between time distance and your space distance. And the most casual examination of your setup indicates that you have random time distances. Zero by probability, Bickle said. That won't wash. That shot effect test, Flattery said, his voice bored. Fired off impulses which weren't time regulated. You got a variety of delay times there in your system that could average out statistically by probability mechanics. Over the entire net, Bickle demanded. Why not? The bigger the net, the more likely this is to be true. And your net here took an entire computer. We got the right answer from the translator, Bickle said, his voice pouncing. Try probability on that. I wouldn't think of it, Flattery said. No more than I think of coming to define conclusions on the basis of one test run. Bickle glared at him. Okay, we'll run it again. No, you won't, Flattery said, not without figuring how to isolate your ox from the computer. And before you think of taking any storage units out of the system, ask yourself which one it'll be. Will it be a unit protecting the life of someone in the hype tanks? How about a unit controlling the drive? Can't tell one from the other without a complete block sort of the entire system, Bickle protested. Exactly. That shouldn't take more than 8 or 9 years with the manpower available to us. Flattery's argument was unassailable. Bickle knew this didn't ease the anger that surged through him at the sight of the man's coldly superior attitude. Still, Bickle felt they had approached some unspoken, elusive, and vital fact that all of them should recognize. They had approached it and wandered away. Then we'll transmit the problem back to Moonbase and let them run it for us, Bickle said. Forgetting your analysis of why we were sent out here to solve it? Flattery said. Ah, you're admitting we were sent out here to sink or swim. I'm admitting nothing, but I suggest you come in and man the AAT. A message has been reeling in from Moonbase for the past minute. They got a message. Some new orders from the Moonbase. A lot of technical terms in this one. As long as you understand the gist of the story, though, chat, I think that's the most important thing. They need to figure out how to develop consciousness. And there's all these things that they need to consider, random elements being introduced into the system here and there that they hadn't accounted for, systems, fail safes, and other things that had not been told to them, and it all just reveals the fact that like they're here to solve this problem, and if they don't, they're freaking dead. Let's find out what they do, y'all. Chapter 16. The high data rate, sense perception, and identification abilities of the human system mostly bypass verbal analytic awareness. We are generally conscious of a cognitive recognition after the fact. In this way, what we understand as consciousness has to be identified as a reflexive monitoring ability with quite limited application. To produce consciousness, artificial or otherwise, we are stepping down, not up. John Lon Bickel the fifth, message capsule datum. So yeah, he's another Bickel that died. He's not the Bickel. As I suppose the Bickel is the one in our story, right? Morgan Hempstead's depersonalized voice filled the control room as Bickel started the playback of the new message from Moonbase. Calling UMB ship Earthling. This is Project calling UMB ship Earthling. A long rolling silence followed, and they grew aware of the hissing of the tape as it sped across its sorting heads. To Prudence, that hiss was something primordial and perilous. It was a noise from the slime of evolution. She felt that some dangerous part of her own brain came awake at hearing it. That's foolish, she told herself. I'm reacting to my last injection. That had to be it. The chemical experiments on her own flesh were creating imbalances. She was using a series of variations on tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, now, shifting the CH3 forms and adding oxygen. She's all high. That was just the hissing of tapes, she reminded herself. But her head wanted to move from side to side. Something within her was fascinated by that sound. Pickle glanced around the room, flattery at the big board, yet composed and so serenely sure of himself. Prudence in her action couch and with her eyes intent on the vocal translator at the AAT. Timberlake in his couch, eyes closed, breathing deeply. One might almost think he was asleep, but for the pulse at his temple. Pickle recognized the mannerism of Timberlake's. It meant the man was chewing over a heavy problem. Hit it, Hempstead said. That must be an error, Pickle said. The AAT goofed on that one. We do worse ourselves sometimes, Flattery said. On the question of defining consciousness, Hempstead said, reference is made to nerve barrier and threshold data on your computer. Best dive to date. Best definition to date, Flattery said. That's what he must have said. They're having errors on the playback? New organic mental core, Hempstead said. Medical personnel are directed to abandon all such repeats in their waste of order. There's something wrong with the AAT, Prudence said. Not with the AAT, Bickle said, with the translator circuits from the computer. That goddamn wild program we flushed through the system like a high colonic, Timberlake growled. He opened his eyes and stared accusingly at Bickle. Abandon all such attempts, Hempstead said. Repeat, abandon all such attempts. This is a direct order. That sounds like him rightly enough, Prudence said. Under no circumstances are you to attempt to make inanimate components, Hempstead said. Try that one with your violin, Timberlake said. Analyze course and reaction data related to mass changes, Hempstead said. Unknown area derived mathematically. Harsh, Timberlake snarled. Garbage. Project over and out, Hempstead said. Acknowledge your compliance. Timberlake sat up, swung his feet to the deck. Go ahead, Bick, he said. Acknowledge your compliance. Flattery glanced at Timberlake, returned his attention to the board. Timberlake obviously was making a bid to regain his authority. That could have been predicted. The first step back would bring him charging out, from fear for all those lives dependent on the life system, not for any other reason. Flattery had watched the way Timberlake studied the life system repeaters. Nothing wrong there yet, but a threat to any part of the ship was a threat to all. Was he asking us to install a new brain? Prudence asked. Where could we get one? Timberlake asked. We've already been through that, she said, looking at each of them in turn. As for the first time since taking her position with the umbilicus crew, Prudence allowed herself to wonder what it really would be like to become the fleshless embodiment, the mentality which was central to a driving behemoth such as the ship. She shivered. They taunt me with blasphemy, Flattery thought. Are you cold, Prudence? He asked. He watches me all the time, she thought.
medical part of her faced the feminine part then. I'm quite comfortable, she said. But she wasn't comfortable. Moods of depression and elation shot through her without warning and had to be concealed. Strange psychic aches tortured her mind. Fantasies of godlike power competed with the urge for physical abasement. She suspected she was close to finding the selective simulator of consciousness. Some of the combinations she was now using on herself provided enormous amounts of oxygen to the brain in abrupt bursts. There seemed to be a threshold effect involving the blood brain barrier. The experiments produced residual effects, though. One of their byproducts had forced her to complete abandonment of anti-S and its body chemistry balanced substitutes. Lately, she'd had to mask and suppress acute withdrawal symptoms. She had found herself unable to deny the profound compulsive hungers for foods heavy in B complex vitamins. She also found herself plagued by sexual dream fantasies involving all of her companions. Bickle turned from the AAT with a length of printer tape, said, "Garbage." "What else?" Timberlake snapped. Flattery started to speak, froze in the act while he studied the track graph on the board. He hadn't imagined it. The graph was climbing. "We've been gaining speed for several minutes now. Slow, but steady." "Drive problems now?" Timberlake snarled. Flattery activated the drive readout, scanned it. "No, no emission. GR level shows normal radiation drop." "Mass register?" Bickle asked. Flattery's hands flicked over the keyboard. He scanned his gauges. "Out of register. Mass reference is out of register." "What are your readings?" Bickle asked. "They vary through 10 Argos," Flattery muttered. "They don't graph back. No series constant in the curve of change. Mass is out of register with speed." "What did Hepstead say?" Bickle demanded, looking back at the printout tape. "Analyze course and reaction data related to mass changes. If he... That could be garbage," Timberlake snapped. "Still, that gradual speed increase," Flattery said. "A slow increment for about 4 minutes now." "The ship is programmed for emergencies," Prudence thought. That's what they had said. But which are emergencies from that program, and which are emergencies from an unknown source? Flattery took comparator readouts. "In the past minute and 8 seconds, our speed has gone up 0.011002 against the fixed reference." Bickle began shifting plugs on his computer board. His fingers danced over the keys. He checked the telltales, looked into the visual readout screen. "Mass interference," he said. Timberlake coughed. "Is that thing saying our speed has raised our mass to a point where something is colliding with us?" "We don't know," Bickle said. "And with that computer, the answer could be garbage," Timberlake said. "But the problem isn't garbage," Flattery said. "I'm getting direct reports. Speed and mass are major variables," Bickle said. "Mass reference is cockeyed. Something outside the rated spectrum is colliding with our sensors. That'd throw the... Prepare for retro firing," Flattery said. "Wouldn't it be wiser to turn ship?" Timberlake asked. He kicked up the manual cocoon switch, and the action couch snapped securely around him. "Roger's right," Bickle said. "Use minimum change. Something's happening for which we have no experience." "I'm starting retro with micro emissions," Flattery said. "Prue, monitor the track graph. Tim, watch our mass reference. I'm recording for later analysis." "There is a later," Timberlake muttered. Flattery ignored him. "John, monitor hull temperature and Doppler comparison." "Right." Bickle cleared his throat, thinking how crude was this quarter division of functions when compared with a properly working, ship-controlled robo-brain. The umbilicus crew was a pack of limping cripples by comparison, and in a situation where they needed to run and dodge and balance with the ability of an athlete. "Starting retro," Flattery said. He moved the microcontrols one notch. Action couches made a slight adjustment to the change. It registered as a creeping movement of the repeater, consoles against the conduits, pipes, and instruments of the fixed walls. "Track graph report," Flattery said. "Speed is dropping unevenly," Prudence answered. "Fits and jerks." Bickle watched the edge of his repeater, where it aligned with the edge of a wall plate. Could, could see the buckling movement of the ship as a series of tiny jerks. His hands on the console keys sensed the tremor in the ship. Tell me when the graph levels off," Flattery said. "Mass reference report." "Uneven," Timberlake said. "Graph average is dropping, but the direct register is going up, down. It's 0.008, 0.0095, 0.0069. "Let me know when it levels," Flattery said. Without being asked, Bickles said, "There's a micro increase in temperature along the first quadrant." "Stern. Compensation system is taking care of it adequately. Doppler reference shows an actual speed decrease of 0.00904 plus." "Mark," Flattery said. "S over C confirms," Prudence said. Flattery advanced the microcontrol another notch, feeling perspiration along his back and neck, collecting too fast for his suit to compensate. "Track," he said. "Graph is now dipping below the fixed reference," Prudence said, "still dropping unevenly." "Ion reading," Flattery said. 1 over 4.280001. Timberlake answered. Agreement with emission rate is positive. Retro normal. Rate of downgraph is now even on the track, Prudence said. Mass reference is level and 0.00001,001 out of agreement, Timberlake said. Hull temperature? Flattery asked. Holding, Bickle allowed himself a deep breath. Changes in hull temperature where they should not occur. Changes in their speed without a positive explanation. These were more alarming than a physical breakdown that could be touched that they could touch with their hands and repair. Flattery heard the sigh and thought, the tin egg had a close call. Close to what? Does Bickle know? Did he tell us everything he got from the computer? Even so, how can we trust computer information now? But Flattery recalled another part of Hempstead's possibly garbled message. Unknown area derived mathematically. What if they were pretty close to Hempstead's actual words? Flattery asked himself. An unknown of some kind derived mathematically. The ship had encountered a mass speed problem. Bickle said. Raj, drop the speed another 2 points and hold. We'll want regular checks on mass speed variations from here on out. Complying, Flattery said. Report in order. He turned to the microcontrols, dropped them 2 more notches. Track graph declines on an even slope, Prudence said. Mass reference agrees, Timberlake said. Ion emissions normal. Temperature holding normal, Bickle reported. Doppler comparison is positive 0. Bickle looked at those two thin black needles of the Doppler comparator. They were what put the bite in this emergency. They provided positive checks on speed through the Doppler reference to fixed astronomical bodies. The Doppler comparison and change in speed had agreed 1 for 1. Bickle felt he knew only one area of probability to explain what had happened, but the area involved a theory that had always been treated as a kind of mathematical game. You first had to assume the universe contained two groups of matter, each moving faster than the speed of light in relation to the other. Then the Cavendish extrapolation on gravitational theory produced negative transformations. Wide holes were opened in the Newtonian theory that two bodies always attract each other with a force proportional to the square of the distance between them. It was that word always, and the implication that all matter exerted gravitational attraction, Bickle thought. I do not understand what happened, Flattery said, but I have the distinct feeling we were close to the brink. The brink of what? Prudence demanded. Fear was plain in her voice. We're close to running wild out of the solar system, Bickle said. Out of control, unable to maneuver. Quite likely, we were close to being hurtled into another dimension. Without a prayer of escape, Timberlake said. The negative transformations in grav theory, Prudence whispered. What? Timberlake barked. The implicit energy exchange for enormous mass shifts near the speed of light, Prudence answered him. The negative forms in the equations don't all cancel out until you build hypothetical transformations beyond the speed of light. There is a region of mass speed change wherein two bodies theoretically repel each other rather than attract. Now, Bickle said, how do we tell Hempstead and his boys about this without blowing the whole show? We've already blown the whole show, Timberlake growled. The computer isn't necessarily wrecked, Bickle said. Our life systems still work. Ship servos and sensors appear to be in order. I get consistent replies and demands for information. Consistent doesn't mean correct, Timberlake said. Was Hempstead telling us to create and to cease and desist? Flattery asked. If he was, we don't know, Bickle said. As long as we don't know, we don't have to obey. Or disobey, Flattery thought. How is it the computer seems to function on information demand, but not for AAT translation? That could mean only one band to debug, Prudence said. If it does, she broke off, staring at Bickle. Bickle had his eyes closed. Perspiration beaded his forehead. The circuitry was as clear in his mind as though projected there from outside himself. He had never completely disconnected the aux from the AAT system, which they had used for the aux's interpretive routines. An empty sensation expanded through his chest as he realized every signal from outside the AAT had gone through the aux into the computer, there to be lost, there to mix up the AAT translator loops. You didn't disconnect the plug board from the aux, Timberlake whispered. My computer readout comes through my AAT board, Bickle said. He could hear the desperation in his own voice. Every program demand I put on the computer went through those same aux circuits. You were using subroutines with known addresses, Prudence pointed out. And everything you asked for has been scattered through the entire system and lost, Timberlake said. Has it? Bickle asked. He opened his eyes. There was only one logical way to be certain, of course. It would not do any more damage than already had been done, if there was damage. We didn't think of Bickle cutting us off from the UMB this way, Flattery thought, destroying the translator loops.
Without the translator systems to decode the multi-repetitive laser burst messages, the umbilicus crew might just as well use hand signals for its messages to and from Moonbase. Pickle could build a radio transmitter, of course. It would take only a few watts to punch a message across these distances, but no preparations had been made at the UMB for such a communications method, and the number of eavesdroppers would be enormous. Carefully, because he had to be certain the first time, Pickle switched 5 patches in his AAT board, triple checked them. What are you doing? Timberlake demanded. Be quiet, Prudence ordered, as she recognized what Pickle intended. But he's already a diagnostic routine, Pickle said. We'll use a simulsynchronous B register search with a repeat on our original test of the aux circuitry. Harm has already been done. This will just go right through the same channels. It can't do any more harm. And the B register search could tell us where our data went, Timberlake said. Yeah. You sure? Flattery asked. The technique is right, Prudence said. Working quietly, triple checking, Pickle patched together the necessary program. He took a deep breath, sent the first elements of the diagnostic routine through the inputs, setting the balance of the test for the offline operation. He had to keep a constant check on this, key each step himself. Presently, he began to get DDA outputs. He put it on the conditional transfer with printout at each step in the control sequence. He felt breathing at his shoulder, looked up to see that Prudence had abandoned her action couch, knelt beside him to stare up at the readout. The data has all been shifted, not lost, she whispered. How it looks, Pickle said. Might as well be lost, Timberlake barked. No, Pickle said. No, Pickle refuted him. The computer's fully operative as long as we routine everything through the aux. Why didn't the AAT work? Timberlake demanded. Come off that, Tim, Pickle said. You helped me build that test setup. The incoming messages were going through the AT circuits twice, Timberlake said. Sure. The bits canceled themselves out all along the line, Pickle said. We probably didn't get a fifth of the message. It did seem short, Prudence said. That message is the only thing we've really lost, Pickle said. I'll ask for repeats on. Wait, Flattery said. Yes? Pickle looked at him. What do you tell UMB happened to the original message? Flattery asked. He glanced away from the big board, met Pickle's gaze. And what if they were telling us to cease and desist? You know something? Timberlake said. The beginning and end of Hempstead's message didn't seem to be garbled at all. Standard call and sign off, Pickle said. It could be recognized and translated from the smallest fractional bits. But the message load was the lightest at the beginning, Timberlake said, and that could be part of the explanation here. You get minimum cancellation. We might be able to salvage more of the message, especially in the first parts before the load jammed it up. This is exceedingly cautious for Timberlake, Flattery thought. Is he coming around to Pickle's viewpoint? So they all realize that they can't let Moonbase know or they're dead. They're even more dead than they already are. Pickle found himself moving hesitantly, not knowing why, but unable to escape the logic in Timberlake's argument. He slid out the message print, shuttled it to the replay rack. Only the print had been the first If only the print had been the first step in reception instead of intermediate, he thought. He removed his feedback patches, sent the print directly into the aux, and then into the AAT, routed the readout through the optical character print system and into the screen above them. Hempstead's original call appeared there, and they all looked up at it. That had to be accurate, Pickle thought. There came that original long delay, then choose by lot from the colonists in the hibernation a suitable brain to replace your organic mental core. the moon base told them to get a new brain to plug into this thing. Choose by lot. Okay, so it's random. All brains are viable. um, Suitable brain to replace your organic mental core. Period. Medical personnel are directed to take a human brain, comma, install it as temporary organic mental core, comma, and return ship to big. Sometimes that's what it says. Busy. Sometimes with the hit period on the question of defining consciousness, comma, you have this data several times in your computer, comma, and you can refer there. Period reference is made to data item as in 0 for nerve barrier and threshold data item your computer. Period. Best dive yet, period. New organic mental core, period. Medical personnel are directed to abandon all such repeats in their waste of order, period. Pickle broke the sequence. Do you want any more of it? It's getting increasingly unreliable, Flattery said. I see no need.
Those callous, dirty sons of bitches, Timberlake snarled. Chapter 17. Mm, Do a bit of stretching. Man, this is a lot longer than I remembered, chat. Let me just see where the book actually ends. Epilogue. 273. A lot of chapters. A lot of chapters. Yeah, 31 whole chapters. Okay. We might do this in 3 parts. But for the time being, let's keep going. Chapter 17. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou strivest from joy. Well, actually, that's my issue. Let's get it bigger. Let me actually read it on the screen in front of me instead of looking at this tiny little phone screen. I'm so dumb, chat. Oh, only one person can have a book checked out at a time, so we got to return it here. Log in and borrow. Sign in. Yeah. Down, 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 down. Meow, 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 meow. Meow, 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 meow. Dum, da, dum, da, dum, 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 dum. Dee, 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 dee. Dee, 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 deem, deem, dee, deem, dum, 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 da, da, dum, doo, doom, doom, deem, dee, dee, deem, dee, dee, deem, dee, 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 deem, dee, dee, deem, dee, 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 dee. Chapter 17. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou strivest from joy for no misdeed. Like Adam, I was apparently united by no link to any other being in existence. Satan has his companions, fellow devils to admire and encourage him, but I am solitary and abhorred. Frankenstein's monster speaks. Do 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 do. Maybe we zoom in a bit. There we go. And that's the only reason I'm saying maybe we do it in 3 parts because staring at the screen, reading, I guess it's the same thing as gaming. All right, I shouldn't complain. All right, get to it. For a long time after Timberlake's outburst, they sat silently in the cocoon's isolation of their action couches, absorbing their predicament. Only flattery at the big board appeared animate. It was his couch which creaked with his movements. Switches clicked as he depressed them. The underlying stink of their enclosed quarters by introspection lifted across their awareness thresholds. Take the take the brain from a colonist, Prudence thought. Had Hempstead really told them to commit such an atrocity? She believed it. Yep, monsters. Bickle appeared almost asleep, but his hands clenched and unclenched. Prudence looked at Timberlake, seeing how dark his face was, the way he instinctively bared his teeth. Those fools back at UMB, she thought, didn't they realize they'd be stamping on the rawest inhibition of our life systems engineer? Kill a helpless colonist in the hype tanks? No, she thought. What UMB asked was worse than killing. Flattery, noting the effect of the message on Timberlake, felt the jangle of consciousness. Of conscious, not consciousness, felt the jangle of conscious and personal fear. Where his own niche on the ship was concerned, Flattery maintained few illusions. He was both Judas goat and sacrificial goat, classic functions of the religious extremity. He was a giver of life and executioner. Unless he feel godlike in those powers, he was the ultimate victim of whatever would be the Earthling's destiny. He was the ultimate victim because it was in his hands. As a bird that wandereth from her nest, so is a man that wandereth from his place, he quoted to himself. Aloud he said, what they command, we cannot do that. Better not suggest it, Timberlake said. Then we'd better assess whatever it is we've built there in that computer shop and go on from that point, Flattery said. What have we built, John? Damned if I know, Pickles said. Well, it doesn't need to be a consciousness anyway, Prudence said. God damn it, Pickle snapped. There you go again. Consciousness. Conscious. Isn't it flobble gobble? He said flobble gobble. This is a new word, chat. Flobble gobble. Isn't flobble gobble? That's what you might as well say. You don't know how to define consciousness. You don't know what it is. But you go around throwing sentences together as though they had meaning, and that's it, Timberlake said. That's what hits me right in the pit of the stomach. We start out to build something, and we don't know what it is we're building. It's time to hit them. It's time to hit them with it, Flattery thought. You're wrong, Tim, Flattery said. And so are you, John. Prudence does know what consciousness is, just as you do. He's a human being. Humans are the only creatures within our ken who can possibly know what consciousness is. Computers can't do that job. Humans must. Then let her define it, Bickle said. Maybe she can't, Flattery said, but she possesses it. And a while back you were saying we might not have to define it, Prudence said, and she stared accusingly at Bickle. It's just damn poor engineering, Bickle said. Copy the original and hope you get the same results. We can't be sure we're copying everything in the human model. What are we leaving out? He's frustrated and striking out, she thought. Now's the time to push while Raj has him set up for me. Okay, engineer, where do you think you're going with your field theory idea? Bickle stared at her, realizing abruptly that she was deliberately pushing him. All right, I'll play her game, he thought. Am I supposed to be angry? No, that'd be too easy. The best attack comes from an unexpected quarter. Stretch yourself a bit, Prue, and try to follow what I'm saying, he challenged her. The field theory approach deals with three forces. First, you have the source of the experience, the universe which inflicts itself upon us. That has to be deeply involved with the way your nervous system functions, she said. Don't try to teach me my specialty. I wouldn't think of it, and you're right. That's the second element. There has to be someone who experiences the universe. And third, you have the really tricky one. This is the relationship between that someone and all of this neural raw material, which we call experience. This relationship is this third order phenomenon. That's our field. The self, she said. A field, Bickle countered. She shrugged. Huxley's spatio-temporal cage, with its confused swarm of ideas. Yeah, Huxley said the conscious self had to derive from memory, but he was just playing with words because he was frightened by what lay beyond the words. You're not? Flattery demanded. You'd better listen closer, Bickle said. When you try to say that a conscious self derives only from our memory function, you're identifying the someone who experiences with that which supplies the experience. Memory is experience, Prudence argued. We have to focus on this third order relationship, Bickle said. The total field that's greater than the sum of its parts, she said. She's ready for her shock, Bickle thought. For that matter, so's Raj. You self-satisfied medicos give me a pain. You say only humans are conscious. From Raj, that's sacrilege. From you, Prue, that's stupidity. You see one corner of the spectrum and immediately say you know what the whole universe of light is like. Never once has either of you once asked, am I really conscious? Flattery felt an unexplainable pain across his chest. The console in front of him blurred for a heartbeat. Then he had himself under control. Back at UMB, they laughed and quoted Edgar Allan Poe, Flattery thought. They had said that individual humans might not have posed organ of analysis, but that a whole society could create such an organ out of one of its members. Had they realized what a dangerous monster they were creating? What could you hide from Bickle if he turned his attention to it? That was what Prue meant, of course, when she cautioned against underestimating Bickle. But had the UMB manipulators known what a night they had loosed amongst the pawns? Perhaps they realized, at least unconsciously, when they set me to watch over him, Flattery thought. Try to resolve the basic question into smaller and smaller parts, Bickle said. Smaller and smaller labels, but that's just avoiding the issue. Are we conscious? Prudence whispered, rolling the thought over and over in her mind. And she thought of her experience with the marijuana derivative, THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. She thought an anti-ataraxic, a selective stimulator of consciousness, something to hold the darkness at bay in the very special manner. But the instant she neared the simulation experience, darkness had spilled over all the edges of her awareness. Adrenochrome, she thought. It was a sudden and explosive thought, as if something that had crouched in her path and as of something that had crouched in her path and leaped out at her. Adrenochrome, nitrogen to the CH3. If she inverted it and gave a common CH3 bond with one of the THC forms, that was very like some of the deadly ones, but in an extremely small dosage, would it get through the blood-brain barrier? And adrenochrome was one of the hallucinogens. What of that? You get your fingernails over the ledge, Bickle was saying, and you haven't raised your eyes up to the lip. You can only see the dim reflection of light, but you lie and tell those around and below you that you see to the horizon. As though his words unlocked a door, the memory of a dream flooded through Prudence. She had dreamed it sometime during a long sleep, sometime when in Hybe. She had dreamed it when in the hibernation tank. In the dream, there had been others around her, but she had been rejected by them. The others built a low wall and taunted her to climb it, but each time she tried, the others raised the wall higher, higher, and higher, until she no longer even attempted it. Finally, the others had ignored her, but she had heard them laughing and talking on the other side of the wall. Remembering that dream, Prudence looked at Bickle and understood the thing he had probably seen from the beginning. The problem of creating an artificial consciousness was the problem of consciousness itself. It was an enormous structure, like the tall cliff or a wall that they must climb. It loomed over them, dour and black, with only the taunting hint of light at the top. You did that deliberately to make me feel small, she accused. Welcome to the club, Bickle said. What are you saying? Timberlake demanded. Are you trying to say that even if we build an analog of a human, we still might not achieve this consciousness? Let's take another look at what happened to the ship brains, Bickle said. What's the basic command they were supposed to obey? Remain conscious and alert at all times, Timberlake said. But hell, if you're saying they succumbed to fatigue, that's nonsense. They were buffered against all. Not fatigue, Bickle said. I'm just wondering what if they took that order literally, that order to remain conscious. The degree of consciousness, Prudence mused. Threshold, Flattery said, and and there was wonder in his voice. Yes, Prudence said. A hyperconscious subject has a low threshold. Impulses pass into his awareness with ease. You're suggesting the OMC brains couldn't handle hyperconsciousness? Something like that. Look, she said, the assault of nerve impulses on the human consciousness. She looked defensively at Bickle. Well, what else are we going to call it? Okay, Bickle said. Go on. She stared at him a moment. This assault is constant, gigantic. The impulses are always present. They swarm around you. There has to be a limiting factor, a threshold. Impulses have to pass a certain threshold before you grow aware of them. It's like, okay, the light there has a threshold, you see it. You're getting certain stimuli, like all the different things in the world, right? Like, see, like it's registering as like, okay, being touched, and then that's like harder, and then eventually pain. The thresholds. What constitutes a thing as a recordable signal, or not necessarily? I mean, I guess it's all recorded, right? But like stored signals. She stared at him a moment. This assault is constant, gigantic. The impulses are always present. They swarm around you. There has to be a limiting factor, a threshold. Impulses have to pass a certain threshold before you grow aware of them. And that threshold varies from person to person, even minute to minute in the same person, Flattery said. But how do nerve impulses get over that wall? Bickle asked. Why did he use that word? She wondered. Sometimes the impulses grow stronger, Flattery said. But that isn't the whole story, Prudence said. There's activity on the side of the experiencer, too. You focus your attention on something, and that lowers your threshold. Danger can lower it, too, Flattery said. And he waited to see if Bickle would pick up that cue. Bickle looked at Flattery, wondering, we're in danger right now. Raj, is that something they did to us? Deliberately? You think that you think that danger out there isn't real? Flattery asked, unconsciously hooking a thumb toward the shortest distance between himself and the outer hall. Bickle held his silence, feeling his tongue go dry. Unreasoning terror pervaded him. It was a towering oblivion that threatened to engulf him. John, Prudence asked, are you all right? Just a touch of ship vertigo, Bickle managed. He forced a smile. Perhaps. Maybe I'm tired. I went more than 2 shifts at the haywire setup in the shop, and I haven't really had a good rest for I don't know how long. Knowing when to relax the pressure is half the job, Prudence reminded herself. Get some chow and shut eye. It might help if we let up on this problem a bit. And she thought, I could give him that advice, but I won't take it myself. Those last chemical experiments on her own body were playing hob with her sense of reality. She wondered if she should take Raj into her confidence, but rejected this thought as soon as it occurred. Raj would say that she was meddling. He'd force her to stop, and she felt that she didn't dare stop now. There was something so close. What about answering Hempstead? Bickle asked. Let him sweat, Timberlake growled. They'll figure it was a transmission breakdown if we go too long beyond the delay period, Bickle said. They'll retransmit the message. Okay, so they're gonna just pretend like they didn't get the message. That gets us the retransmission without committing ourselves, Flattery said. Isn't that a rather devious suggestion for our cleric? Bickle asked. A man of God telling them to lie, telling them to lie to UMB, the moon base. That was the psychiatrist speaking, Prudence said. Go on, get your sleep. And I can sit here and twiddle my thumbs, Timberlake said. Bickle looked at Timberlake, recalling the man's bitter anger over Hempstead's suggestion. For the first time in many hours, Bickle focused his full attention on Timberlake, seeing the pride the man had swallowed in relinquishing command of the ship, seeing Timberlake's primary concern for the human lives around him. There was no easing Timberlake's tensions right now, Bickle realized. The lives were in danger. Every life on the tin egg, from the lowliest chick embryo in the hive tanks right up to Timberlake himself. Timberlake sometimes saw through things intuitively, Bickle realized. And Timberlake was an engineer. It might help him if he were kept occupied, and this crew could use any available edge. Tim, Bickle said, we have to solve for consciousness the way you solve for a specific effect in a transceiver or a tuner or an amplifier. You might be chewing that over while I get some rest. I need some specific answers that can be translated into working schematics. But we're stuck with that thing in the shop, Timberlake protested. Only as a beginning. We have to use the aux, yeah, because it's our only entrance into the computer for some of our vital data now. But it's still a place to begin. Nothing's changed, really. Except we're 2 days closer to our deadline and no closer to a solution, Timberlake growled. Bickle put down a surge of anger. Suit yourself, he turned away, crossed to the hatch into the quarters, let himself through, sealed the hatch behind him. The sound of the hatch expanders hissed through him like a thigh, and he found himself standing in the galley round, wondering if he had enough energy left to eat and get into a sleeping cubicle. I have to eat, he whispered. Got to keep my strength up. He pushed himself across to the quick bar, sent half a heat charge through a squeeze tube of soup. Heat charge through squeeze tube. Squeeze soup. So good. Gulped it. Chicken. He could feel the broth pouring energy back into him. He took a tube of hot chocolate after the soup. He crossed to his padded tank, checked the cubicle's life system repeaters. Every gauge was normal. He let himself into the tank, closed its hatch, pulled the pneumo pin slowly, gently. The tank enclosed him, buoyed him. He felt the flow of oxygen-rich air across his face. The air filtered and refiltered so many times that it had lost most of the ship's stink. His muscles began to unwind, as usual, when he prepared for sleep in the cubicle. He wondered at the soothing effect. It was like a return to the womb. What womb bore the original me, he wondered. Somewhere there was a mother and a father. Even if I was grown in a gestation chamber, somewhere flesh and blood conceived me. Who were they? I'll never know. Useless even to think about it. He forced his attention instead onto the cube around him, the artificial womb with its deep sense of security to ensure sound sleep. Why do we get more Why do we get more and better rest in a cube? A quick nap on an action couch is nowhere near as restful. Why? Is it something atavistic as phylogenetic return to the sea? Or is it something else, something we have yet to recognize? Pickle focused his awareness on the billowing softness of the enclosure, the rich, moist air. Sleep was sending its tendrils through him, and he sensed how slow and even his breathing had become. How rhythmic. Set rhythms, he thought, holding back sleep. There's an oscillation factor in our problem. Oscillation is present in hypnotic captivation, in sleep breathing, in the heartbeat, in sex. Living cells possess north and south magnetic poles, he thought. He recalled the biologist designer Vincent Frame expounding on that theme in a lecture for biological engineering back at the UMB. I am a structure composed of many different cells, Bickle reminded himself, coordinated. Frame had hammered at this theme, pointing to vital clues in the oscillations and pulses of human activities. Cell energies. In that remembered lecture, Frame had been explaining the design of a low gravity lounge chair, rhythms, characteristic rhythms of living. Frame had returned to the concepts time and time again. Oscillation. Despite his fatigue and the sleep lurking at the edge of his awareness, Bickle felt the urgency of this hot track onto which his mind had stumbled. He thumped his intercom alive, looked up at the tiny monitor screen. Timberlake's face peered back at him. Remember Dr. Frame's lectures? Oscillation? Discuss it later. Bickle released the intercom switch before Timberlake could answer. As he sank back, Bickle felt sleep come up from some dark place underneath to engulf him. So interesting. He was like, all right, we got to remember this. We'll talk about it later. Chat, I think I'm going to go make some more tea. Although we're probably going to do this in 3 parts. We'll get as far as we can. And one more Destination Void stream, which is really interesting. I thought this book was a lot shorter, but we're only on chapter 18. It's not that I have to get off at any certain time, but yeah, we'll do it in 3 parts most likely. And probably do some gaming tomorrow instead of finishing this off. Right back. I'm back.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There you go, brother. Chapter 18. Is consciousness merely a special form of hallucination? Prudence Lon Weigand, the fifth, the message capsule fragment. Battery had just shifted the central board to Prudence. He looked across at Timberlake, who sat on the edge of his action couch staring at a memo pad of ship paper. The thin paper rustled faintly as Timberlake folded back a page, scribbled something onto a clean surface. The monitor screen beside Timberlake showed that Pickle had sunk into sleep almost immediately after that strange call. Tim, did Bick's message make sense to you? Flattery asked. Maybe, Timberlake looked up from his notepad. Let's assume that consciousness involves an organic receptor of some kind which reproduces a field structure, and this field structure expands and collapses under different stresses, Prudence said. Timberlake nodded. And that field structure itself would be a phenomenon which we call consciousness. Are you two agreeing with him? Flattery asked. For the moment, Timberlake said, now let's follow this assumption. The organic receptor would be subjected to a constant storm of impressions, and most researchers think the cerebellum is the focus of the storm of impressions, Prudence said. But it's certainly not the seat of consciousness, Flattery objected. There may be no seat of consciousness, Prudence said. We're talking about motile phenomenon. It can move by itself. Okay, Timberlake said. What's the impression input? What does the cerebellum receive? Electrical inputs of some form, Prudence said. Yes, but how is that input sorted into its receiver? Flattery inhaled deep breath, caught at last by the feeling of the hunt with this quarry near. Was it possible that this crew would succeed? He grew conscious that Prudence had asked him a question. What? So it seems maybe Flattery was part of the original experiment. Very interesting. Would this be the crew that succeeds? He's wondering. Do you understand this concept? We're talking about electroform inputs of nerve impulse groups, and each group would be of extremely short duration. But the groups wouldn't be absolutely discrete, Flattery said. Of course not, she said. It's like the ambiguity of light. Sometimes the physicist has to think of light as waves, and sometimes as particles. Wavicles, Flattery said, his tone musing. Right. So sometimes we think of these nerve impulse groups as discrete units, particles, and sometimes we think of them as continuous flow, waves. Track the discrete flow for me, Timberlake said. She glanced away from the big console, studied Timberlake. There was no avoiding the excitement in him. With that intuitive sense of his, Timberlake had leaped ahead somewhere, and the others were supposed to follow. The track's pretty well plotted, Flattery said. Action currents are conducted over the cortico-pontocerebellar tract. What are you driving at? She saw it as she saw it then as a diagram in her mind. 1. Cortico. 2. Ponto. 3. Cerebellar. 3. Phase. Were those the essential 3 of Pickle's field self? Prudence put, Prudence put this thought into words, waited, not knowing quite what to expect from the others. 3 tracks, not 1, Flattery mused. No, that's not it. Then pouncing. Holographic. A holographic field, Prudence said. She saw that Flattery, too, had been caught up in Timberlake's excitement. But the board demanded her full attention for a moment, and it was only later that she realized she had missed some silent exchange between Flattery and Timberlake. Perhaps a knowing look, a nod. Presently, Timberlake said, I want you to say it. What's the terminal point of all that input? It goes into the silent or non-functional areas of the cerebellum, Prudence said. Flattery felt a need to expand on this. That's superior and inferior lobes, the declive, the folium, and the tuber, the major portion of the cerebellum. Mediation is across the tract from the cerebral cortex, Prudence said. Silent or non-functional? Timberlake asked. Don't you medical people ever listen to your own words? What do you mean? Flattery asked. There was an edge of anger in his tone. What's the potential? The effect? Timberlake demanded. I don't. Energy arrives. Does it turn a wheel? Does it turn on a light? You can't keep piling energy into a system indefinitely without some kind of output, a balance or balancing effect. But you said, what's the output, the potential, the balancing effect? The energy goes in. What does it do? Are you suggesting that this potential, that is consciousness? Prudence asked. And she remembered Bickle calling the field systems an infinite sponge. Figured it out. Flattery cut across this thought.
Didn't Bickle say something about consciousness being like the vestibular reflex of the inner ear? The way we balance, Timberlake said. The thing that tells us which way is down and which way is up. Strangest thing, Prudence said. I feel as though I'd been a little bit asleep all along, not awake enough to realize what Bickle was driving at. But now you're beginning to get it, Timberlake said. That storm of sense impressions doesn't stop when you're asleep, Flattery argued. Are you trying to tell me that sleep is a form of consciousness? As he spoke, he remembered making the same argument to Bickle, but now he had to be honest with himself and face up to the obvious answer plus everything that the answer implied. Yes, of course, Flattery said. Sleep's a form of consciousness. It just falls near one end of the spectrum. And all that unexplained energy, Timberlake insisted, it has to be used for something, Flattery said. Yes, I see that. All right, Timberlake said. The consciousness effect field or whatever may mediate that energy balance. Perhaps it's a homeostat. All biological control mechanisms are homeostats, Prudence said. So what? It's not enough to say that consciousness juggles the storm of sense impressions, Flattery said. That still leaves your question unanswered, Tim. What happens to the energy? There must be another effect somewhere in the system, Timberlake said. There has to be an unexpected flow of energy somewhere, or a flow that's been explained the wrong. Synergy, Prudence said. Flattery shot a surprised glance at her. The word had been on the tip of his tongue. Synergy, Timberlake mused. Any medical surprises in there? Prudence heard the question within the question. The life systems engineer had a working acquaintance with Synergy, but he wanted to know if a medical simplification might help him. Timberlake was sniffing down a hot trail. It's the effect produced by our spinal reflexes, she said. Synergy acts through the cerebellum, an extra effect. It's on the side of the circuit that leads out from the cortex. We're looking for an integrating or balancing effect, Timberlake said. That's possible, Flattery said. This wasn't enough for Timberlake. Simple synaptic integration is enough on the side leading toward the cortex. Does synergy involve output from the frontal lobes or the gyrus? Could it account for our missing energy? Why the gyrus? Flattery asked. I keep looking for secondary mediation areas. We don't dare overlook anything. We have to be right the first time, or we go down the tube the same way all the other ships did. You're going around in circles the same way Bickle does, Flattery objected. So you narrow down the mediating area to the frontal lobes. So what? Timberlake wouldn't be distracted. Lots of researchers think that the frontal lobes. Fine, Flattery interrupted. No end of good people may have suggested that the frontal lobes are the mysterious center of consciousness. But Prue may be closer to it than you are. Motile, remember? There may be no seat of consciousness. Timberlake blinked. What good does it do to know where it is if you don't know what it is? Flattery pressed him. Synergy may not be totally explained, but still Flattery pressed him. Synergy may not be totally explained, but it's still useful as a concept. However, if you're suggesting that synergy is consciousness, dead end, Timberlake said. But Bickle thinks we're after a field regulating sensor which deals with mental and emotional responses. So that's what's bothering him, Prudence thought. She said aloud, if we're going to reproduce this thing artificially, whatever we build has to have sensory, mental, and emotional responses to regulate. Flattery pressed himself back into his couch. We can give Bickle's ox its sensory and mental responses, but how do we give it emotions? Getting to the root of the problem. What is it that makes you a human being? Mm-mm. Beam, 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 beady, dee, beam, beam, beady, dee, beam, beam, bum, ba, da, dum, da, dum, da, 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 dum, dee, 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 dee. Dee, deem, dee, 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 deem, dee, deem, da, da, dum, da, dum, da, da, dum, 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 dee, 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 deem, dee, dee,
Meow 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 beating beating beam beam beating beam 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 beating Oh my god. What if Luffy was raised by Big Mom? Ow, it's so hot. It's so hot. I needed it. I needed it. Wake up. Wake up. It's so hot. I just burned my tongue, chat. What about negative feedback? Timberlake asked. Emotions always involve a goal. Negative feedback suggests a goal seeking element in the system. Consciousness requires a goal? Flattery asked. He realized by the sudden silence greeting this question that they had lifted themselves to a critical point of this analysis. They could all feel it. Pickle's challenging ideas had goaded them to this effort, and all of them were poised, sprinters, waiting for the gun. A goal, Timberlake whispered. His voice grew louder. An object on which to focus. He looked at Flattery. The field relationship. Close, but not quite it, Prudence thought. Flattery said, not an entity or a thing or an area of the brain, but a connecting link between such things or entities or areas. Out of the corner of an eye, Flattery saw Prudence adjusting the dial on the big console. He sensed the waiting attentions in her movement. A bridge, Timberlake shouted. Of course, a bridge. A bridge built out of language? Prudence asked. But the symbols are loaded with errors, with weaknesses and flaws, Timberlake said. That's it. Flattery saw a new quickness and sureness enter Prudence's movements as she digested this. Time spanning, she said, with words, with symbols. And Flattery thought. There is a gateway to the imagination you must enter before you are conscious, and the keys to the gate are symbols. You can carry ideas through the gate from one time place to another time place, but you must carry the ideas in the symbols. Do you know what you carry, though? Well, do you know, though, what you carry, and who it is that carries? Every symbol has hidden premises behind it, Flattery said. Every word carries unspoken assumptions. And the most critical word in the whole problem is the word consciousness, Timberlake said, which assumes, Prudence said, that there is a self to be conscious. A bridge crosses from one place to another, Timberlake went on. If it starts breaking down, the engineers get out the original blueprints, the materials, study the bridge under static conditions and under loads, then they may replace parts, put in new bracings, or tear the whole damn thing down and start over, said Prudence. Didn't either one of you hear me? Our word assumes there's a self to be conscious. We heard you, Flattery said, but there are more important hidden assumptions than know thyself. What about know thy limits? Limits, Timberlake picked up the word. At one end, sleeping or the sleep of death. At the other end, waking. And the question of Western religion, Flattery said, is what lies beyond death. But the question of the Zen master is what lies beyond waking. For key rice's sake, the voice was Bickle's, and it plunged down onto them from the command circuit screen overhead. Flattery looked up with a smug smile to find Bickle glaring down at him from the screen.
I leave you for half an hour and you lure those poor fools down the same mystical dead end, tossing labels around just like those jackasses back at UMB. Zen Master, next you'll trot out cosmic consciousness of all the impractical. John, we've refined the question down to its essence, Timberlake said. If you'd. I asked you to give me some circuit suggestions. I've been listening to you play verbal medicine ball for 10 minutes, and what I want to know is this: how will all that yakking build one circuit? Just one circuit. You yourself asked UMB to define consciousness, Prudence protested. Because I wanted to keep them occupied and out of our hair. The screen went blank. Over here just playing games while Pickle's doing the hard work, trying to figure out how to build the actual circuit. But it all adds up, chat. Everything happens for a reason. As though she read his mind, Prudence said, John's installed an override on the command circuit. Any idea why? Didn't you see where he was? Timberlake demanded. He was in the shop, working on that ox mess. Timberlake unlocked his action couch and, in almost the same motion, launched himself at the hatch to the computer maintenance shop. He wrenched at the lock dogs, but they remained immovable. He's locked himself in. He's jammed the lock. Timberlake's voice rose in fear. He wrecks our computer. You noticed. So you may as well watch, taunted Bickle's voice. They looked up to see a view of the shop on their big screen. Bickle stood with the detritus of the initial aux installation around him, dangling leads, meters, neuron blocks, all stacked precariously away from the computer walls. Bickle, listen to reason, Timberlake pleaded. You can't just tear into. Shut up or I'll turn you off, Bickle warned. He knelt with a substitute neuron block, inserted it between the aux and the computer wall, began making connections. Please, John, Prudence begged. You're not going to stop him by talking to him, Flattery said. Listen to Raj, Bickle slipped another neuron block into place against the wall, made new connections. Rhythm, he said. I went to sleep on it and it woke me up. That and your yakking. Rhythm. Another substitute neuron block went into place beneath the first two. Describe what you're doing, Flattery said, and he motioned for Timberlake to come to his side. Brain vision anatomy can be reduced to the mathematical description of a scanning process, Bickle answered. It follows that any other brain function anatomy, including consciousness, should submit to the same approach. I can duplicate the alpha rhythm cycle for a brain scanning sweep by setting it up in the time cycle of these neuron blocks. If I trace each rhythm from a human model and duplicate what's the function of each of these human rhythms, Flattery demanded. As he spoke, Flattery scribbled a note on a pad of ship flimsy, pressed it into Timberlake's hands. Timberlake looked up to the screen, but Bickle still had his back to the video eyes that matched the screen view. We don't know that function for certain, do we? Flattery asked, and he motioned frantically for Timberlake to read the note. Timberlake turned his attention onto the paper, read, Back way, around from the hype tanks. Bickle hasn't jammed the hatch from the quarters. Take the other tube and surprise him. Again, Timberlake looked up to the screen. The ox was taking on new shape under Bickle's hands, reaching out to the angle of the shop against the computer wall. He began to assume a feeling of a topological improbability in Timberlake's eyes, with jutting triangles of plastic, oblongs of neuron couplers, strips of Eng multipliers, and the colored-coded leads interweaving like crazy spiderwebs. Timberlake felt a hand grab his arms. Shake him! He looked at the hand, followed his arms to Flattery's glaring face. He's just lost in the moment. He's so just mesmerized by the things that Bickle's doing, but he has a job to do. He has to go and stop this guy. Flattery gestured toward the note in Timberlake's other hand. Again, Timberlake looked at the note, recognizing why he remained rooted to the spot. Around the hype tanks? No, it would have to be through the hype tanks. Flattery must know that. Timberlake turned his tortured gaze on Flattery, bringing the terror up to full awareness. Bickle has infected me with his cynical skepticism. I'm afraid of what I'll find in the hype tanks if I look too close. I'll find the tanks empty, nothing but leads back into. He's scared that he's gonna find out that it's all just some cruel joke, an experiment. I'm afraid of what I'll find in the hype tanks. If I look too close, I'll find the tanks empty and nothing but leads back into the computer from the tanks. And the computer will be programmed to stimulate the presence of hibernating life in those tanks. The whole thing will turn out to be a monstrous hoax. I'll discover I've been life systems engineer to nothing. Why do I fear that? He wondered, even though even this thought set him shivering because his goal, his purpose. Otherwise, is he really conscious? Is he is he an AI? Why do I fear that? He wondered, even though his thought, even this thought set him shivering. Again, Flattery shook his arm. Why doesn't he go? Timberlake wondered. He's so anxious. The answer was obvious. Flattery wasn't as knowledgeable about computers. He couldn't analyze what Bickle was doing and repair, if that was possible, the damage. I'm panic stricken, Timberlake thought. But he knew he couldn't stay rooted here. He had to take the other passage, and when he got into the hype tanks, he wouldn't be able to resist the close inspection. He looked beyond the dials and gauges and repeaters. He'd look into the tanks. Despite his unexplainable terror, the other possibility remained. The tanks contained life, and this life shared their danger. What do you think he's gonna find, chat? Do you think he's gonna find people, or is it gonna be just empty or empty? I wouldn't even need to be a box. You know, it could just be a server. It could just be like a. It doesn't have to be anything. It doesn't have to be anything at all. Chapter 19. The cell has energies that oscillate and pulse with the tumult of living. We see reflections of this root activity in that coordinated cell structure, which we commonly refer to as a human being. Have you ever watched a man tapping his finger nervously on a desktop? Have you ever timed the periodicity of the human eye blink? Breathing has characteristic rhythms for different conditions of the total cell structure. You must keep this in mind when you design devices to be used and occupied by this human bundle of cells. You must always remember the pulse and the needs of the component cells. Vincent Frame, biochemist slash designer, the guy that Bickle was dreaming about. I'll use the shot effect generator again, Bickle thought. He leaned into the organized clutter of the aux, clipped the lead onto the temporary input, threaded the lead out, and draped it to one side. The effect and the way to achieve it were still clear in his mind. He had awakened suddenly, not knowing how long he had slept, but feeling refreshed, and with this answer filling his mind. He turned to the computer leads linked to the aux through a buffer that would feed its impulses into a test memory bank, connected this to the new bank of neuron blocks, and put the system on full interlock. Will you at least explain what you're doing, John? Flattery's voice flowed out of the screen. Bickle glanced back, saw Prudence at the controls, Flattery sitting on the edge of an action couch. No sign of Timberlake. But this screen's eyes didn't expose all of Com Central. Was it probable that Timberlake was trying the hatch? Well, let him. We'll have only ourselves to use as models for producing this consciousness function, Bickle said. And everybody keeps saying that we can't get into ourselves the way an engineer should to duplicate the mechanism. But friend, there's another approach, thoroughly tested and effective, Prudence said. Raj? Flattery looked at her. I'm getting current drift on the auxiliary power supply. The shop, Flattery said flatly. John's taken a direct line to prevent us from shutting him off. He looked back at Bickle. Right? Right. Shouldn't cause you any trouble. I've isolated the line. Your main board is still functioning. Bickle turned back to the aux. Began tying in a series of timed neural fibers. What's the tested effect method? Flattery looked up at the telltales of the ComCentral board, following Timberlake's progress by the heat sensors. Timberlake was out of the second zone now, turning in towards the opposite side of the shielding and the hype tanks. Why was Tim so reluctant to go? Flattery wondered. Bickle finished a triple connection along the timed fibers, straightened. The system you couldn't tear apart and examine is called a black box. If we can make a white box sufficiently similar and general in potential to the black box, that is, make it sufficiently complex, then we can force the black box by its own operation to transfer its pattern of action to the white box. We can cross-link them and subject each to identical shock effect bursts. What's your white box? Flattery asked, his interest and attention caught in spite of his fears. That thing? He nodded toward the crazy block construction of the aux. Hell no, this is nowhere near complex enough, but our entire computer system is. He's gone crazy, Flattery thought. He can't be suggesting seriously that he'd throw a scrambling shot effect burst into the computer, their only lifeline, the only way that they're still alive, this computer. Again, Flattery glanced up at the telltales. Timberlake was at the edge of the hype tanks, moving at a maddeningly maddeningly slow pace. Maddeningly. Why can't I say this word all at once? Madden. It's Madden 2024. What's the last Madden game that came out? 26. does 26. I lost my place. Again, Flattery glanced up at the telltales. Timberlake was at the edge of the hype tanks, moving at a maddeningly slow pace. Then, how does the ox function in this? Flattery asked, returning his attention to the screen. This is our sorter, Bickle said. It sorts the rhythms of the system and acts as a crude set of frontal lobes. He linked two parts of his construction by cross jacks in a patchboard. There. Now to run a few tests. Shouldn't you wait? Flattery demanded. Shouldn't we discuss this a bit more? What if you've made a mistake? And no mistake, Bickle said. Flattery looked to the telltales. Timberlake was in the hype tanks now, but he wasn't moving, just stopped there. Set Bickle, our organ of analysis, at too high a pitch, Flattery thought. Should have known it could run wild. What was keeping Timberlake? Straight line test first, Bickle said, and he closed the key on the computer wall. He stared at the diagnostic circuit dials above him. Flattery held his breath, turned slowly to look at the big board in front of Prudence. If Bickle's test loused up the central computer system, it'd show up first on the big board. The flashboard retained its quiet green, the steady ticking of relays through the graph counters and monitors held at an even pace. Everything appeared soothingly ordinary. I'm getting individual nerve net responses on the separate blocks, Bickle said. Flattery kept his attention on the flashboard. If Bickle ruined the computer, the ship was dead. Most of the Tin Eg's automatic systems depended on the computer's inner lines of communication and supervisory control programs. Didn't you hear me? Bickle demanded. I'm getting a nerve net response. This thing will behave like a human nervous system. Raj, he is. It was Prudence. Flattery dropped his gaze to where she was pointing. She had shifted a small corner of her own auxiliary board into a repeater system tied to Bickle's diagnostic circuits. Beta rhythm, she said, pointing to the scope in the center of the board. Flattery watched the sign play of the green line and the scope, digesting what Bickle had said, but the scope implied black box, white box. Perhaps it was possible, theoretically, to use the entire computer as a white box to take the transfer pattern called consciousness. But there remained many unanswered questions, and one was more vital than all the others. What do you intend using as a black box? Flattery asked. Where'll you get your original pattern? From a conscious human brain. I'm going to take one of our spare hype tanks and adapt the electroencephalographic feedback system as a man amplifier. He's utterly mad, Flattery thought. The shot effect shock would kill the human subject. So he's gonna get one of those hype tanks, turn it into some sort of conductor for human consciousness, and he's gonna shoot that into the computer. Bickle looked out of the screen, stared at Flattery, realizing that the psychiatrist Champlain had seen the possible deadliness of the proposal. Who will bell the cat? Bickle thought. He swallowed. Well, if necessary, I will. How would you protect the subject from the shot effect bursts? Prudence asked. Curare? Even as she asked, she wondered how she was protecting herself from her own experiments. The answer was daunting. No better than Bickle would. What had made this crew so prone to all or nothing efforts? I believe the subject will have to be fully conscious, Bickle said, without any medication or narco inhibitions. He waited for the explosion from Timberlake. This idea was sure to outrage the conditioning of the life systems engineer. Where was Timberlake? Absolutely not, Flattery exploded. It'd be murder, or maybe suicide, Bickle said. Prudence looked away from the console, met Bickle's eyes. Be reasonable, John, she pleaded. You're already endangering the computer with that. The ship's still functioning, isn't it? Bickle countered. But if you throw a shot effect burst through that, she nodded toward the stacked blocks and interwoven leads of the ox beside Bickle. How will you avoid damage to the computer's core memory? Core memory is a fixed system and buffered. I'll keep the ox potential below the buffer threshold. Besides, he shrugged, we've already put shot effect bursts through the computer without, and scattered information from hell to breakfast, she snapped. We can still find that information if we use the ox to sort the addresses for us, Bickle said. Flattery glanced at the sensors in front of Prudence. What was wrong with Timberlake? Was he injured, unconscious? But the sensors revealed a narrow path of movement from the life systems engineer. all of it within the Hype Tank complex. If I understand you correctly, Prudence said, you'll have to add nerve net simulation channels to the Ox until it and the computer are as complex as a human nervous system. As you build it and test it, we become more and more dependent on that jury-rigged Ox monstrosity for our very lives. It has to have the full range of sensory apparatus, Bickle said. There's no other way. There must be, she said. Where'd you get such a mad idea? From you. Buck momentarily stilled her tongue. That's impossible. You're a female, Bickle pointed out, capable of biological reproduction, of conscious life. In that method, you have a substrate of molecules that are capable of assuming a large number of forms, different forms. Those molecular those molecules assume a particular form in the presence of a molecule that already has that form. He shrugged. Black box, white box. I thought you meant for me personally, she said, looking up at the telltale sensors and seeing the apparently irrational movements of Timberlake. Look, Pickle said, unaware of the preoccupation. The basic behavior of the computer will remain intact. We won't interfere with supervisory programs or command constants. We want to set up a system dealing with probabilities, with mobility constant for the games theory, Flattery sneered. You can't predict all of the behavior of your machine. He looked back at the telltales. What was Tim doing? That's just it, Pickle said. If the machine's going to be conscious, we can't predict all of its behavior. By the very nature of consciousness, by definition, consciousness is a game where the permissible moves aren't arbitrarily established and advanced. The sole objects to win. Anything goes? Flattery wondered. He focused suddenly on Bickle, recognizing the essentially blasphemous nature of such a concept. There had to be rules. The machine gets part of its personality from its creator, part from its opponents, Bickle said. Something from God, something from the devil, Flattery thought. There had to be essential error in this path. Somewhere, Bickle was behaving far outside the predictions. Their organ of analysis was acting illogically. He was not making the best possible move each time, unless it really was. Unless it is the best possible move. And his rationality and his logicality are blinding him. He can't see the forest for the trees or the trees for the forest. I don't know how it goes. You'll introduce error factors and loss increments into the entire computer, Prudence cautioned. That's not only illogical, it's, she broke off, studied her board, made a pressure balance correction in the atmospheric recirculation system and waited to see if the automatics could hold the new setting. You have to make the best possible move at all times, Flattery said. Your suggestion does not appear to. There you've hit it, Bickle agreed. Best possible move. Sometimes your best possible move is to make a dangerously poor move that changes the entire theoretical structure of the game. You changed the game. What about all those lives down in the hype tanks? Prudence asked. Do they have any choice in this game? They already made their choice. And while they're helpless, you changed the rules, Flattery said. That was one of the chances they accepted when they accepted hibernation, Pickle said. That was their choice. Flattery abandoned the argument, pushed himself off his action couch. What are you going to do? Prudence asked. Check on Tim. Where is Tim? Pickle asked. Down in the hype tanks, Flattery said, knowing Pickle could get the answer himself once he consulted the shop's repeaters. Deep in the hype tanks? Pickle asked. Of course. Prue! Pickle snapped. Try to raise him on the command circuit. She heard the urgency in Pickle's voice, whirled to obey. There was no response from Timberlake. You fools! Pickle said. Flattery stopped at the tube hatch, glared up at the screen. Who let him go down into the deep tanks? Pickle demanded. You blind idiots! Don't you know what he's likely to find down there? What do you mean? This whole damn ship's nothing but a simulation device, Pickle said. There'll be nothing down there except a few crew replacements. Those tanks have to be empty. He's wrong, Flattery thought. Or is he? Thought staggered Flattery. He saw immediately how that might pull the props out from under Timberlake. A man tuned as fine as the rest of them for a specific function. He'd still have the crew systems, Prudence said. She stared across the room at Flattery, feeling the loneliness. The tin egg with its programmed peril might contain only a few isolated humans launched into nowhere. They wouldn't, Flattery thought. But if they'd prepare me to cheat the rest of the crew, his feet felt rooted to the deck, swallowed in a dry throat. But it's impossible. They promised me when I discovered the actual Tau Ceti records, if we succeeded, we could just send back the message capsule and continue as. Oh, it's all simulation. It's all just a game. And he thought that, like he had a higher position. He had more power in this game than the others. I have more knowledge than you. Look at this. It's a fake. Tau Ceti, there's nothing there. And they're like, oh, you discovered that? Okay, well, if you stay quiet about that, and then, we have an important job for you. Raj, are you sick? Prudence asked. She studied him, seeing the lost, sunken look in his eyes. The Tau Ceti planets are uninhabitable. Yes, Hempstead had admitted when confronted with the evidence. No, we didn't, but the universe is known to contain billions of inhabitable planets. You realize you can't come back here, of course. The danger to your hosts. The biopsy donors are all criminals, Flattery had said, bringing his other suspicion. Brilliant people, but misdirected, Hempstead had protested. That is one of the reasons you can't come back, but nothing's to stop you from going on to explore and find your own Eden. Remembering these words, Flattery felt how hollow they sounded. Sham and trickery, all the way, he thought. But why? They were never intended to succeed. They were only data. It's all just data. They're just collecting data. Chapter 20. In a right handed person, the so called rational function operates mainly from the left hemisphere of the cerebral cortex. The intuitive operation, however, lies mainly in the right hemisphere. There is strong evidence for positive feedback between the two hemispheres operating along the corpus callosum. The substance of this interchange remains largely a mystery. There can be no doubt that it serves an important function in consciousness. Timberlake had launched himself down the communications tube with desperate haste, knowing he had to move swiftly or become stalled in terror. The tube distribution lock, he sealed the hatch behind him, snatched a Roblox monkey from its rack, tuned the sensors to the track imprinted in the tube wall, slammed its wheels onto the guide marks, and grabbed the handhold controls. Again, he encountered that terrifying reluctance to move and stared up the tube, studying the long infinity curves of its visible through the transparent safety locks. Can't go back, he thought. With a sudden wrench, he twisted the little robot's toe and unit's drive to full on, let it jerk him ahead along that curving track. The wind of his passage was a dim hiss. He looked like a loose piston driving down that tube. Locks opened automatically. The robot's signal closed behind him. He slowed for the protective jog through the shielding layer, twisted around through the branching outside of the hype tanks, drove back down along the flat angle that returned through the water shield, and stopped in the lock chamber to the tanks. He racked the Roblox, stared at the hatch. It was a big yellow oval, its seal warning in heavy blue letters. This hatch must be closed and dogged before inner hatch will open. Now that he was faced with it, Timberlake felt a calm submission to fate. He gripped the hatch dogs, broke the seal, seeing the line of frost inside as the hatch swung open. His suit generators hummed upscale, compensating for the drop in temperature as chill air spilled out of the lock. Timberlake slipped into the lock, closed and sealed the outer hatch, turned around. A rack of heavy-duty generators hung over the inner hatch with a big warning sign above them. Extreme danger, deep space or LT suit required before entering the next lock. Be sure you have a spare generator in working condition before opening this hatch. Timberlake looped the straps of a spare generator over his shoulder, gave the thing's turbine drive a short burst to check it. The generator hummed briefly. He swung the rack of them aside, broke open the next hatch, slipped through, and dogged it behind him. Now a smaller hatch greeted him, and letters on its face. Admission only to life systems engineer or medical personnel. Suit security must be maintained at all times beyond this point. Do not open this hatch until you have adjusted your suit for the extreme low of hibernation temperatures. Timberlake coupled the auxiliary generators to his suit, checked both generators, adjusted them for temperature security override. The remembered routine occupied his awareness, keeping his mind off the space beyond that hatch. Suit seals slithered up under his gloved fingers as he secured them. He dropped the anti-fog viewplate over his face, ran a check tape along the seals. The moment of final decision had come. Gonna go in. He's gonna go check. He's gonna go check on those tanks. Uh-uh. Timberlake forced himself to act slowly and calmly. More than his own life depended on what he More than his own life depended on what he did now, he told himself. Stray heat inside there could play havoc with helpless lives. Passed his suit's baffles in front of a heat sensor, studied the gauge. 0. His gloved hand went to the dogs of the inner hatch, broke the seal. The hatch popped slightly, indicating a small difference in pressure. Nothing abnormal. He stepped through into the glittering dry chill of the first bank of hype tanks. This was where Prudence had been. He saw her empty tank on his left side, its leads dangling, the cushioned carrier still open inside. Everything around him was revealed in harsh blue light. He studied the chamber. It was like a giant barrel, an open space in the sensor, surrounded by smaller barrels that were the individual hibernation tanks. A grid floored catwalk led down the open sensor, with short ladders and handholds branching up to the separate tanks. Timberlake kicked off down the length of the tank in 3 low grav jumps, caught a handheld beside the breaker lock that separated the section from the next one. He looked back. No, they weren't little barrels, he thought. The individual tanks stretched away from him all around, like so many sections of gray culvert pipe, waiting to be assembled into something useful, like a drain. There was no point in examining the tanks in here. He knew this was the number one section, high priority crew replacements. If there was deception, it'd be further along the line, in one of the deeper sections. Timberlake opened the safety valve at the breaker lock, swung open the hatch, let himself through, reset the mechanism to isolate the section in event of partial damage. He looked around the new section. It was the twin of the other, except for the absence of a rated tank. Timberlake swallowed. His cheeks felt damp and cold. A place between his shoulder blades itched. Quite abruptly, he found himself remembering Professor Aldous Warren, the lecturer in biophysics back at UMB. He was a goat-bearded old man with a senile-sounding voice and a mind like a scimitar. Why do I think of old Warren now? Timberlake wondered. As though the question released a hidden awareness, he recalled the old man diverging from a seminar discussion to talk about moral strength. You wish to test moral strength? He'd asked. Simple. Construct a med computer with a public call box attachment. Set it so that anyone submitting to the computer's probes can find out within a day or so when he'll die. Of natural causes, of course. If you wish to call old age natural, then you step back and see who uses the thing. Someone, a female student, had asked, wouldn't it take a kind of courage not to use this computer? Pah, old Warren had exploded. Pah, old Warren had exploded. Another student had said, hypothetical questions like this always bore the hell out of me. Sure, old Warren had answered. You young toughs haven't faced the fact that we could build such a med computer right now, today. We've had the ability to build it for more than 30 years. It wouldn't even be very costly as such things go. But we don't build it because very few people, even among those who could build it, have the moral strength to use it. Timberlake held himself still in silence in the hype tank, realizing why he'd remembered this incident. Coming into this cold, lighted tank was like using old Warren's hypothetical death predictor. Bickle infected me with the certainty that this shop is not what it seems to be, Timberlake thought. He took over command, pushed me aside. The only reason for being that was left me, he looked up and around the tank, wasn't here. If this is taken from me, then I'm truly useless, except as a kind of computer shop flunky for Bickle. Yes, Bickle, right away. Bickle, is there anything else? Bickle? Sense of astonishment at how he had unconsciously dramatized the change of relationships. With a sense of astonishment at how he had unconsciously dramatized the change of relationships within the crew, Timberlake rolled this realization over and over in his mind. There was a kind of pride in the awareness of his inner workings, the quirks his mind possessed, and an understanding that this stemmed in part from his conditioning. Presently, he launched himself up into an individual tank hanging low on the left center. The tank was like all the others, racked in curving rows around it. He activated the inner cold light, caught a handhold, and bent close to the tank's inspection port. The light flickered, glowed. It illuminated the metered master tubes dropping from the tank's other side, a color-coded sheaf of spaghetti that trailed down left and right to the figure. Under the light. A man's craggy profile lay there, waxy skin and faint black beard. He was like a mannequin figure, and Timberlake thought immediately of elaborate human sized dolls racked here to maintain the pretense. The man's name was there on the tank's identification plate, immediately below the place where the spaghetti of life support connections entered. Martin Rhodes, and the code number which identified the specialties conditioned into him. He was an organizer, an executive, and another medical person. If that was a real person, Timberlake found his thoughts floating from concept to concept. Person, persona. Does a persona provide a reason to etre? Reason to etre? Raison de etre. You didn't pronounce it properly. Raison d'etre. Okay, that's the Google way of pronouncing it. Okay, well, fine. Raison d'etre. Raison d'etre. Does persona provide a raison d'etre that meant a reason to be? That meant a reason to be. We looked it up. We looked it up. Book. Thank you for telling me though, Mr. Frank Herbert. Though that's Frank Herbert explaining it to me because he wrote this book. What's my reason for being? Timberlake studied the life system's telltales above the spaghetti sheaf. They registered a faint flame of life within the tank. Timberlake made a tiny adjustment in the oxygen meter, caught the immediate feedback surge on the tank's electroencephalographic coupling. The oxygen meter reset itself. This, then, was a hibernating man. That feedback reaction, with its elaborate encephalographic play, could not be programmed for the unexpected. The oxygen shift at this moment in time obviously could not have been anticipated. A human homeostat had detected it, though, and reacted correctly. Timberlake dropped down to the gridded catwalk, checked a tank opposite and another further down the line. He went through them at random, pausing only to check that each held a living human. Names leaped out at him from ID tags. Thosa Lon Nicky, Artemis Lon St. John, Peter Lon Vardak, Legata Lon Hamel. One of them he recognized. Black hair, olive skin with its waxy undertone, chiseled features. Frank Lipera, a fellow student in human engineering. Presently, Timberlake went on to the next section, and the next. He found he recognized many of the occupants. That this filled him with a feeling of loneliness. He felt that he might be the keeper of a museum, guarding old relics for a brief human lifespan, sequestering beneath these blue cold lights a share of man's culture and knowledge. He came at last to a corner of the Section 7, another recognizable face from his UMB past. Blonde and Germanic, pale waxed skin. Timberlake read the name etched above the inscription port. Peabody, Alan K7A. Yes, it was Al Peabody. Timberlake agreed, yet in a way, it wasn't Al. It was as though the companion of Timberlake's gym classes, his opponent in handball and moon tennis, had gone away somewhere to wait. But Peabody, Alan, K7A, proved to be a viable human with individual homeostatic reactions. He could be awakened to speak and act and think. He could be awakened to consciousness. And consciousness is a thing beyond speaking and acting and thinking, Timberlake thought. He loosed the handhold, dropped lightly back to the catwalk, feeling no particular need to check further. He knew with an inner certainty that all the tanks held hibernating humans. Bickle might be correct about the tin egg being an elaborate simulation, but in here, the simulation went too far to be anything other than what it seemed. The hype tanks had not been larded with obvious deception. I was supposed to come through here, surprise Bickle, and stop him, Timberlake thought. Stop him from what? Some tiny unregistered perception worked on the edge of Timberlake's awareness, assuring him that whatever Bickle was doing right now in the shop held no immediate danger to these helpless sleepers. Whatever Bickle's doing, he must be doing it right now, Timberlake thought. I've been gone almost an hour. A whole hour he was wandering around over here. Those guys were only yelling at each other for like 10 minutes at most, right? Interesting. He looked up at the rows of tanks, yet every tank I checked was functioning at peak efficiency, as though the entire system were tuned to a critical optimum. Timberlake nodded to himself. You might almost think a mental core still rode monitor on the ship's vital parts. He felt that he could almost hear the tremendously slowed oscillations of life around him. The spot between his shoulder blades had ceased to itch, but he felt painfully tired now, slightly dizzy, his body dragging at his muscles. It occurred to Timberlake then that they could be going at the problem of reproducing consciousness too literally. Will we have to install mechanisms to permit that ox to grow tired? He wondered. We're too literal, like peasants. All hail Damalari Kitty, asking the genie for 3 wishes. Maybe we won't like our wishes if we get them. God, I'm tired. Something moved near the far bulkhead. A space-suited figure. For one instant of unreality, Timberlake thought that one of the hibernating charges had revived itself. Then the moving figure came into the full glare of the cold light, and Timberlake recognized Flattery's features behind the anti-fog plates of the helmet bubble. Tim, Flattery called. His voice boomed from the suit amplifiers, echoed with a metallic ringing through the cold air of the tank. Something wrong with your suit receiver? Flattery asked, stopping in front of Timberlake. Timberlake looked down at the command set near his chin, saw that its circuit indicator light was dark. I left it off, Timberlake thought. Never even thought of turning it on. Why'd I do that? He didn't want to be disturbed, though. Flattery studied Timberlake carefully. The man's motions, when first seen across the tank, had indicated nothing seriously wrong. He moved. He seemed aware of his surroundings. You feel all right, Tim? Flattery asked. Sure. Sure, I feel all right. Like 3 wishes, Timberlake thought. Like 3 S's of our school joke: security, sleep, and sex. Something touched his shoulder, and he realized he had heard the inner bulkhead open. He looked around to see Bickle standing there. Feel up to some work, Tim? Bickle asked. I need your help. Some carrier inflection of Bickle's voice, a subtly shaded overtone, told Timberlake that Bickle had been worried about him. But he must know I was sent through here to try to stop him. In that instant, Timberlake realized they were very close, the 3 of them standing here, and the closeness went beyond physical proximity. Whatever you're doing, Bick, Timberlake said, it's having no adverse effect on the hype tanks. Every sleeper I checked was humming along nicely. Every? Bickle nodded. You found look for yourself, Timberlake said, realizing Bickle had not dared test his own suspicion that the hype tanks were a sham. They're all occupied. Excuse me, the politeness sounded odd coming out of Bickle's suit speaker. He jumped to an overhead handhold, swung to a ladder, and, oddly, picked the tank of Peabody, Allen K7A. Presently, he worked his way along the K line of tanks, pausing only to peer into the inspection ports. He dropped back down to the catwalk near its center, returned to them. All of them? He asked, nodding back toward the other sections. The only empty tank's the one we held that held Prue, Timberlake said. Prue, Flattery said. She's all alone in the comm central. He thumbed the outside switch of his transceiver, changing circuits. He saw his lips move, but his voice was only a faint chatter. Bickle looked down, saw that he had ignored his command set. He flicked the switch, caught Prudence saying, so far, but I don't like the idea of being all alone in here in case there's a real emergency. Bickle, too, preferred silence, Timberlake thought. He wanted a moment alone. Flattery returned his suit circuits to voice amplifier, looked questioningly at Bickle. Had we better be getting back? Raj seems more relieved than Tim that these tanks are what they seem to be. Bickle thought, why? You don't want to check the tanks for yourself? I can take your word for it, Flattery said. Can you? What's he doing? Flattery wondered. Is he trying to goad me? Timberlake heard the derision in Bickle's voice, felt their moments of closeness shatter. Without moving their bodies, they had pulled apart. But Timberlake realized with an odd feeling of elation that he had aligned himself with Bickle. This isn't illusion, Flattery said. He waved at the tanks around them. And you are conscious, Bickle said. Flattery suppressed a feeling of rage, but felt a sour taste in his mouth. I will not let myself be goaded, he thought. Of course I'm conscious. Never apply of course to conscious, Bickle chided. Never apply of course to consciousness, Bickle chided. Consciousness can project illusions, insubstantial stimulus objects onto the screen of your awareness. He motioned to the tanks above him. Go ahead, check. We'll wait. Flattery felt stubborn now. I will not. He started to push past Bickle. Where are you going? Bickle asked, catching the arm of Flattery's suit in one gloved hand. The shortest way back, through the shop, Flattery said. If you don't mind, shook his arm free. Be my guest, Bickle said, stepped aside. Timberlake stared at Flattery as the psychiatrist Champlain wrenched the hatch dogs open. Wrenched the hatch dogs, opened the hatch, and slipped through to the next chamber. Flattery's fear was something other than worry about me, Timberlake realized. He's still afraid. Bickle took Timberlake's arm, helped him through, followed, and dogged the hatch. Flattery was already at the next hatch, had it open. Damn poor procedure, Timberlake thought, but he let it go. Presently, they came to the inner locks and the back passage beneath the primary computer installation and up into the shop. They slipped through, sealed the hatch. Pickle threw back his helmet. Flattery and Timberlake did the same. Pickle already was loosening the glove seals. Timberlake stared at Flattery, watching the way the man studied the jutting boxes and angles, the interwoven leads of the ox. Infinite counting that? Flattery asked. Why not? Pickle asked. You have it. You can count beyond the number of your own total nerve supply. The ox has to do the same. You don't know the danger, Flattery said. Some of the danger, Pickle admitted. This ship could be one gigantic sensory surface. Its receptors could achieve combinations unknown to us, could contact energy sources unknown to us. So that's how it achieves amazing powers. It's tapping into other types of energy. Okay, I get that now. Maybe the one on that island tapped into the dark matter, or like negative matter, and that's it. It just poofed everything away. As in, it just ceased to be. They canceled each other out, matter and antimatter, right? What if it's using that? I don't know. Gotta keep breathing. The ship could be one gigantic sensory surface. Its receptors could achieve combinations unknown to us. Could contact energy sources. It could achieve and it could contact energy sources unknown to us. Is that one of the theories? Larry took a step closer to the ox. Before you do anything destructive, Bickle said, and nodded toward the pattern confusion clinging to the computer wall with its wire tentacles. You better know I'm already getting conscious type reactions on a low scale. The system itself activating various sensors. It's like an animal blinking its eyes. A heat sensor here, audio there. That could be random dislodged pattern due to the shock effect bursts, Flattery said. Not when nerve net activity accompanies each reaction. Flattery digested this. Feeling his conditioned fear alertness, the reaction for which he was but a trigger, come to full amplitude. Flattery digested this. Feeling his conditioned fear alertness, the reaction for which he was but a trigger, come to full amplitude. His memory focused on the two red keys and the self-destruction program they would ignite through the computer links of the ship in his room, hidden in his room. Tim, how tired are you? Bickle asked. Timberlake looked at Bickle. How tired am I? Minutes ago, he had been shot through with fatigue. Now, something had keyed him up, filled him with elation. Conscious type reactions? I'm ready for another full shift. This thing's too simple yet to even approach full consciousness, Bickle said. Most of the ship's sensors bypass the aux circuits. Robot's controls aren't connected, and it has no. Just a minute, Flattery snapped. They turned, caught by the anger in Flattery's voice. You admit this goal seeking mechanism may operate entirely outside your control, Flattery said, and you're still willing to give it eyes and muscles? Raj, before we finish, this thing has to have complete control of the ship. To get us across the big empty and safely to Tau Ceti, Flattery said, you're assuming that this ship's computer. You're assuming that's the ship's. You're assuming that's the ship's. Why am I adding an S to ships? Chat. To get us across the big empty and safely to Tau Ceti, Flattery said, you're assuming that the ship computer's basic program? You're assuming that's the ship computer's basic program? I assume nothing. I checked. That's the basic program. To Tau Ceti? Flattery thought. He felt like both laughing and crying because there's nothing there. So, I mean, I guess that's for Bickle too, right? They knew he would check, then he would discover what the actual goal of the mission was. He felt like both laughing and crying. He didn't know whether to tell them the truth. The fools! But no, that would render them less efficient. Best to play the charade out to its silly conclusion. To its silly conclusion, he calls it. Oh my god. He took a deep breath to get himself under control. Okay, John, but you can't anticipate every goal of your ox. Unless we design all its goals into it, Timberlake answered. So they're saying right now it's designed, if it gets consciousness, it's going to probably continue its mission, which is to go to Tau Ceti. Timberlake's saying, but what if we reprogram it and then, like that's not its goal and we can go wherever we want. Flattery waved Timberlake to silence. That defeats your purpose. We'd have to foresee every possible danger, Bickle agreed. And it's precisely because we can't foresee every possible danger that we need this conscious awareness guiding the ship. It's hands on every control. Flattery reviewed the argument, trying to find a chink in Pickle's logic. The words merely echoed many of the UMB briefings to which Flattery had been subjected. You'll be required to find a survival technique in a profoundly changed environment. Remember, you can't foresee every new danger. Failsafes won't work, of course, Flattery said. Same argument, Pickle said. Failsafes work only when your dangers are known and anticipated. Can you prevent damage to the computer core? It'll be buffered 40 waves from Sunday. I've already started the buffering. The ship had an overriding supervisory program, Flattery said. A command to get us safely to Tau Ceti. You're sure of that? The command's there. They didn't fake it. What if it develops that it's fatal to go to Tau Ceti? Why is he quibbling? Pickle wondered. Surely he knows the answer to that. A simple binary decision solves that. We give it a turn back alternative. Ah, Flattery said. The best of all possible moves, eh? But we're in the Queen's croquet game. You said it yourself. What if the Queen of Hearts changes the rules? We've no Alice in this Wonderland to haul us back to reality. I didn't even remember that there was an Alice in Wonderland reference in this book. Nice. So good. The callback. We've done it. We've read it. And through the looking glass as well. The best of all possible moves, eh? But we're in the Queen's croquet game. You've said it yourself. What if the Queen of Hearts changes the rules? We've no Alice in this Wonderland to haul us back to reality. Deliberately poor move somewhere along the line, changing the theoretical structure of the game, Pickle thought. That's an indicated possibility. Shrugged. Then we get sent to the headsman. Which is so here's the thing. What if it develops that it's fatal to go to Tau Ceti? A simple binary decision solves that. We give it a turn back alternative. So remember chat? The ship, it turned all the way around and they were like, how did it do that? They did it. They achieved consciousness on the last mission. By the time the coughing spasms had subsided, the Earthling had begun to make its turn. The movement was impossible, but there was no denying what they all saw. The ship turned through 180 degrees and reversed, heading directly back down its outward track. Any clue at all how they did that? He asked. No, sir, nothing. I want you to go through the message capsule again, he said. We're missing something. From beneath their view, a flame darted. The laser relay with its destruct message. A purple glow touched the ship's bulbous nose. It held for no more than 3 heartbeats before the ship exploded in a blighting orange blossom. Oh, interesting. They did it though. They freaking did it. They had to have done it. Otherwise, how did it do the 180-degree turn, you know? Chapter 21. Okay, I think this is going to be our last chapter. Hopefully, it's a short one. I'm kind of ready to end. Nope, no such luck. All right, which is pretty good for us either way, because that means that we're still making decent progress. There's about 100 pages left in this book, 110 after we get through this chapter. So, yes, getting through it is definitely huge. All right, one more.
Sorry, chat. I wanted to start this stream early so that we could get through it. But even if I had started like an hour earlier, definitely would not have finished this book. So it worked out. Totally. One more. We have one more stream, probably around the same length of time. We're learning our limits, chat. We're learning our limits. We're becoming conscious. Chapter 21. Here we go. Stay hydrated. Chapter 21. No distinct ideas occupied my mind. All was confused. A strange multiplicity of sensations seized me, and I saw, felt, heard, and smelt at the same time. And it was, indeed, a long time before I learned to distinguish between the operations of my various senses. Frankenstein's monster speaks. Prudence at the controls, less than an hour already, was beginning to feel the edge of fatigue, which she knew would have her hanging on only by willpower at the end of her shift. Part of the load on her was the seemingly endless wordplay of those around her, the concept juggling. Words were so pointless in their situation. They needed action, determined, constructive action. Timberlake cleared his throat. He felt a powerful curiosity to inspect and test what Bickle had built, to trace out the circuitry and try to find out why it was not upsetting gross computer function. If we run into the Queen of Hearts problem, Timberlake said, the ship stands a better chance if it's controlled by an imaginative, conscious intelligence. Our kind of consciousness? Flattery asked. There's what's eating him, Bickle thought. He's obviously the one charged with seeing we don't lose a killer machine. He's obviously the one charged with seeing we don't lose a killing machine in the universe. Homeostasis for a race can be different from the balance needed to keep an individual alive, but we're isolated out here, an entire race in a test tube. We're talking about creating a machine with a specific quality, Flattery said. It has to operate itself from the inside by probability. We can't determine everything it's going to do. He raised a hand as Bickle started to speak. But we can determine some of its emotions. What if it actually cares about us? What if it admires and loves us? Bickle stared at him. That was an audacious idea, completely in keeping with Flattery's function as Champlain, colored by his psychiatric training and protective of the race as a whole. Think of consciousness as a behavior pattern, Flattery said. What has contributed to the development of this pattern? If we go back, his voice was drowned in the klaxon blare of the emergency warning. Prudence, Prue. They all felt the ship lurch and the immediate weightlessness as the caged fail-safe switch disconnected the grav system. Bickle drifted toward the forward end of the shop, caught by a stanchion, swung himself around, and kicked off toward the comm central hatch, where he dislodged his lock. He went through the hatch in the same fluid motion of opening it, hurled himself toward his couch. He locked in, swept his gaze across his repeaters. Tim and Flattery were right behind. Prudence was making only minimal corrections on the big console, studying the drain gauges. Bickle saw that the computer was drawing almost 80% of its power capacity, began checking for fire and shorts. He heard the cocoon triggers snap as Flattery and Timberlake took their places. Computer drain, Timberlake said. Radiation bleed off in stores Radiation bleed. I thought it was my screen, but nope, that's the book. That's the book. Radiation bleed off. Radiation bleed off in stores 4, Prudence said, her voice hoarse. Steady rise in temperature back of the second hull bulkhead. Nope, it's beginning to level off. She programmed for a hull security check, watched the sensor telltales. Bickle, looking over her shoulder at the big board, saw the implications of flickering lights as soon as she did. We've lost a section of our outer shielding. And hull, she said. Bickle laid back, keyed the repeater screen for monitoring the sensors, began an analysis outward into the indicated area. You watch the board. I'll make the check. Images flickered out on and out in little screen. Hold on, chat. Images flickered on and out in the little screen at the corner of his board, and as he keyed it to the new sensors farther and farther out. Halfway through Stores 4, he was staring into the star-sequined darkness of open space. The sensor eyes revealed foam coagulant flowing into a wide oval hole from the hull security automatics. A wide oval hole from the hull security automatics. Out of the corner of his eye, Bickle saw Flattery running a micro-survey along the edge of the break in the hull. It's as though we were sliced off with a knife, he said. Smooth and even. Meteorite?
Something damaged the ship. Something sliced it off. He was staring into the star sequined darkness of open space. The sensor eyes revealed foam coagulant flowing into a wide oval hole from the hull security automatics. So it's foaming up, big old breach in their hull. Out of the corner of his eye, Bickle saw Flattery running a micro survey along the edge of the break in the hull. It's as though we were sliced off with a knife, he said, smooth and even. Meteorite? Timberlake asked. He looked up from a check of the hype tanks. There's no fuse. There's no fusing. Yeah, there's no fusing at the edge or evidence of friction heat. Flattery said. He took his hands off his board, thinking of the island in the Puget Sound, the wild destruction in the surrounding countryside. Rogue consciousness. Has it started already? So they already knew to expect. Okay, yeah, because so they probably have some records of what happened on that island, right? So they know that it's capable of doing these things. And so how many times has this is what I'm thinking about. How many times has this experiment succeeded? Is it every single time? And it's also succeeded because Raja Flattery has succeeded in making sure that it didn't get out into the universe? Has it started already? That's such a wild thing to say. What could make that cut through the outer shielding and hull without heating them to at least half a sun? Bickle asked. No one answered. Bickle looked at Flattery, seeing the white drawn look of the man's mouth. Thought, he knows. Raj, what could do that? Flattery shook his head. Bickle took a reading on the laser pulse time log off his own repeaters, extracted a position assessment, noted transmission delay time to UMB, swung his transmitter to his side, and keyed it for the AAT coding. What are you doing? Flattery asked. This we'd better report, Bickle said. He began cutting the tape. How about some gravity? Timberlake asked. He looked at Prudence. System reads functional, she said. I'll try it. She thumbed the reset. The ship's normal quarter gravity pulled at them. Timberlake unlocked his cocoon, stepped out onto the deck. Where are you going? Prudence asked. I'm going out and have a look, Timberlake said. Some force takes a slice off of our hull without crisping the area, or spreading a shatter pattern, There is no such force. This I've got to see. Stay right where you are, Bickle said. There could be loose cargo out there. Anything. Timberlake thought of the lovely Mida crushed by runaway cargo. Swallowed. What's to prevent it slicing us nearly right down the middle next time? Prudence asked. What's our speed, Prue? Timberlake asked. C over 1527 and Holden. Did whatever it was slow us at all? Flattery asked. Prudence ran the back check on the companion log. No. So something hit them or something sliced them, and it didn't cause them to lose any speed. It just happened. It was just a thing. It was just an event, canon event. Did whatever it was slow us at all? Flattery asked. Prudence ran the back check on the companion log. No. Timberlake took a deep, quavering breath. A virtually zero impact phenomenon with a force effect of what? Infinity? He shook his head. There's no kinetic equivalent. Bickle tripped the transmission switch, waited for the interlock, looked at Timberlake. Did the universe begin with Gamal's Big Bang, or are we in the middle of Hoyle's continuous creation? What if they're both? That's just a mathematical game, Prudence said. Oh, I know. The union of infinite masses and finite source can be accomplished by postulating zero impact. Infinite force, but it's still just a mathematical game, a canceling out exercise. It doesn't prove anything. It proves the original power of Genesis, Flattery whispered. Oh, Raj, you're at it again, Prudence remonstrated, trying to twist mathematics to prove the existence of God. God took a swipe at us, Timberlake asked. Is that what you're trying to say, Raj? You know better than to take that attitude under these circumstances, Flattery retorted. When they get that message at UMB, they'll know we've achieved the stage of rogue consciousness. There's no other answer. The next message back is going to be for him to destroy it. So all of this has been accounted for up until this point. But what would be a success? Is there any way for them to actually succeed if it's not a rogue consciousness? But how do they define rogue consciousness exactly? Is it at the first sign of destruction? Is that what it is? You were going to make a guess, Bick, Timberlake said. Bickle watched the signal timer creep around its circle. It had a long way to go yet before giving them the blip that would tell them the message had enough time to reach its mark. Maybe some kind of interference phenomenon that exists only out here in the Saturnian area, Pickle said. A field effect, maybe from pressure waves originating in the solar convection zone. The universe contains a hell of a lot of oscillatory motion. Maybe we've hit a new combination. So he's thinking it's an external force that did this. But what if it was a ship that did it to itself? How? How could it possibly? How does a ship turn 180 degrees like that? Amazing. Maybe some kind of interface phenomenon that exists only out here in the Saturnian area, Pickle said. A field effect. Because they're out by Saturn. They're by the rings of Saturn. Well, I mean, it's the whole entirety of Saturn. Trans-Saturnian area, Pickle said. A field effect, maybe from pressure waves originating in the solar convection zone. The universe contains a hell of a lot of oscillatory motion. Maybe we've hit a new combination. Is that what you suggested to UMB? Flattery asked. Yes. What if it isn't a mathematical game? Timberlake asked. Could we program for a probability curve to predict the limits of such hypothetical phenomenon? Pickle lifted his hands from the AAT keyboard, considered Timberlake's question. Such a program could be figured in matrix functions, he felt. It was something like their hunt for the consciousness factor, trying to trace an exceedingly complex system on the basis of scant data. They could approach it through stacks of linear They could approach it through stacks of linear simultaneous equations, each defining parallel hyperplanes in n-dimensional space. What about that, Prue? He asked. She saw where Bickle's imagination had led them, and took a trial run in her mind, visualizing the diagonal entries when they appeared as coefficients of the simultaneous equations. She saw where Bickle's images. Oh my god! I think we're just gonna end soon. Stumbling over all of my words. No, we're almost there. So many more pages. I was wrong. She saw where Bickle's imagination had led them, and took a trial run in her mind, visualizing the diagonal entries when they appeared as coefficients of the simultaneous equations. The entire process was over in seconds, but she held herself to silence, savoring the experience. It was a new one. She had set up a programming simulation in her mind, checked it out, and filed the results in memory, recalling the bits precisely where she needed them. It was a feat of which she never thought herself capable. Her own mind, a computer. She told Bickle what had happened, replayed the results for him. Bickle found himself filling in the gaps where she skipped over the process to the answers. Somewhere, probably in the long skull sessions back at UMB, he had absorbed an enormous amount of esoteric math. Necessity and Prue's lead had pushed him over onto a plateau where that knowledge became available. He suddenly felt robust, inches taller. The mental effort had lifted him into a hyper awareness, relaxed yet steady, yet ready, aware of his entire vasculomuscular state and emotional tone. The sensation began to fade. Bickle sensed the ship and its pressures on him, the steady, solid motion of matter bound outward from the sun. The entire experience had taken less than half a minute. Bickle felt raging sadness at the sensation faded. As the sensation faded, he thought he had experienced something infinitely precious, and part of the experience remained with him in memory. It was like a thin thread linking him to the experience, holding out the hope of holding out the hope of once more following that thread. But the pressure of the ship and those around him wouldn't permit the indulgence. He realized abruptly that he'd carried some enormous weight within him that might shatter the precious thread completely, and this sent a pang of fear through him. You think such a program's possible? Timberlake pressed. Programming it is out, Pickle snapped. We can't limit the variables. He turned back to the AAT keyboard, began punching out the message with savage motions. Pickle thought about the alterations he had made to the computer system. Black box, white box. The ignition of this thing they were building required a black box, and there was only one obvious black box to give itself over to the imprinting process on the computer's white box: a human brain.
So they need to connect it inside the tank, the human brain, and then they're gonna flash the, the white box, the the brain. They're gonna use the human brain on the white box. Bickle thought about the alterations he had made to the computer system. Black box, white box. The ignition of this thing they were building required a black box, and there was only one obvious black box to give itself over to the imprinting process on the computer's white box. A human brain. I will be the pattern. Would the computer thing then be another Bickle? Prudence stared up at the big console. Bickle's ship. Wondering at Bickle's sudden anger, using the focus he's probably gonna die. He's gonna put his brain in there. It's fatal. It's usually fatal. The Bickle's dead. Would the computer thing then be another Bickle? Prudence stared up at the big console, wondering at Bickle's sudden anger, using the focus on this as an excuse for not thinking about what had happened to the ship. But she couldn't avoid that problem. The image had been caused by something outside the ship. Oh, the image. The damage had been caused by something outside the ship. Okay. There had been a faint lurch transmitted through the tin egg, but that had come afterward. The damaged telltales already had been flaring out red and yellow. The lurch had been associated with a power drain and a shift of switching equipment to the necessities of automatic damage control. Zero impact, infinite force. Something outside the ship had sliced through them like a razor through a soft butter. No, infinitely sharper. Something from outside. She put her hand to her cheek that pointed to something beyond the dangers programmed into the ship. Yep, more things that they cannot be prepared for. It encountered something out of the wide, blank unknown. She thought suddenly of sea monsters painted on ancient charts of the earth, of 12-legged dragons and humanoid figures with fanged mouths in their chests. She, she restored a degree of calmness by reminding herself that all these monsters had faded before humanity's monkey-like inquisitiveness. Still, something had struck the tin egg. She ran another visual survey of her board, noting that automatic damage control had almost completely flooded out stores 4 with foam seal. Section doors were sealed off for 2 layers around the damaged area. Whatever had hit them, it had taken only a thin slice. This time, Bickle raised his hand to the transmitter pulse switch, depressed it. The room around him filled with the hum of the instrument as it built up the energy to hurl its multi-burst of information back across space. The snap click of the transmission interlocked with the dim smell of ozone that with its dim smell of ozone came almost as an anticlimax. They won't make any more of this than we do, Timberlake said. UMB has some of the top men in particle physics, Bickle said. Maybe they can solve it. The neutrino phenomenon, Timberlake asked. Nuts. They'll claim we misread the evidence. Time for my watch, Flattery said. Brew? Flattery's words made her aware in a sudden rush of acceptance how tired she was. Her back ached and the muscles of her forearms trembled. She could remember only once before having been this tired. After almost 5 hours of surgery, in many ways she was making too heavy demands on her flesh, with long watches, work in the shop, and the tests using her own body as a guinea pig. But the adrenochrome THC was proving difficult. It wouldn't cross the blood-brain barrier into active contact with neural tissue, unless she dared to use the near-fatal dosage. She hadn't yet dared, although the prize appeared dazzling. She could only inhibit the lower structures of the brain and release the higher structures to full activity. She could hand Bickle the sequential steps to duplicate as electronic functions. She could hand Bickle the sequential. She could hand Bickle the sequential steps to duplicate as electronic functions. Shift the board on the count, she said. As they shifted the big board, Flattery scanned the instruments, preparing to fit himself into the mood of the ship. And the tin egg does have her moods. Sometimes he felt as though the ship carried ghosts within it, of the 16 clones killed by accident during the construction on the moon, of umbilicus crew members killed by the ship's programmed savagery, perhaps of the OMC's sacrificed on this altar, an altar to human hubris. Those previous tests, all of the dead crews, colonists, and the OMCs, all ghosts riding with us. Here in spirit. They're here in spirit. Get it? Because they're ghosts. Did those bodiless brains have souls? Flattery wondered. For that matter, if we breathe consciousness into this machinery, will our creation have a soul?
Have the automatics have the automatics finished sealing the brake? Pickle asked. All sealed, Flattery said, and he asked himself, when will the rogue consciousness hit us again? He's expecting it. What was in stores for? Prudence asked. What did we lose? Food concentrates, Pickle answered. First thing I checked, Stone said. You had the watch. You should have checked that. Raj, do you want us to start sharing watch and do you want us to start sharing watch and watch? Timberlake asked. After I've had some rest, After you've had some rest, you can help me in the shop, Pickle said. Flattery glanced at Pickle, then at Timberlake, wondering how the life systems engineer would take that rebuke. Timberlake had his eyes closed. His fatigue was obvious in the pale, flaccid look of his face. He appeared almost asleep, except for the tight, shallow breathing. You want to go right ahead, eh? Prudence asked. You don't think we should wait for Hempstead's trained seals to chew this over? Whatever hit us came from outside, Pickle said. That's another problem. John's right, Timberlake rasped. He cleared his throat, untapped his action couch, sat up. I'm bushed. We've just decided, Prudence said, just like that. She snapped her fingers, that you can go on stirring around in the computer like a wild man. We've decided, Prudence said, just like that you can go on stirring around the computer like a wild man. For Christ's sake, Bickle said, haven't any of you realized yet we were supposed to use the computer as the basic element of attack? Bickle stared around at them. Flattery busy on the board, Timberlake half asleep sitting up at his couch. Prudence glaring at him from her couch. That's no ordinary computer. It has elements we don't even suspect. It was hooked up with an organic mental core for almost 6 years during the construction and programming of the ship. It has buffers and leads and cross ties, and its own designers may not even know and cross ties that its owners in the construction and programming of that ship. It has buffers and leads and cross ties that its own designers may not even know about. Are you suggesting it's already conscious? Prudence asked. No, I'm only suggesting that we've come a long way using that computer and our ox frontal lobe simulator. We've come further than UMB project did in 20 years. And we should go on with this. We're cutting a straight line through. There are no straight lines in nature, Flattery said. Bickle sighed. What now? He wondered. If you got something to say, spit it out. Consciousness is a type of behavior, Flattery said. Agreed. But the roots of our behavior are buried so far away in the past that we can't get that at them directly. Emotion again, eh? Bickle demanded. No, Flattery said. Instinct, Prudence said. Flattery nodded. The kind of genetic imprint that tells a chicken how to crack out of its shell. Emotions or instinct. What's the difference? Bickle asked. Emotions are produced by instinct. Are you still saying that we can't bring the ox to consciousness unless it has instincts come emotions? Instincts cum emotions? You know what I'm saying, Flattery said. It has to love us, Bickle said. He chewed at his upper lip, caught again by the beautiful simplicity of the suggestion. Flattery was right, of course. Here was a loose rein that could satisfy the fail-safe requirement, and controlled without galling. It has to have an autonomic. It has to have an autonomic system of emotional reactions. Flattery said, the system has to respond with a set of physical effects of which the ox is aware. Emotion, Bickle thought. The characteristic that gives us our sense of person, the thing that summates personal judgments, processed in capsule form that can occur out of sequence. Here was a break with all the machine concepts of time, emotion as process, an audacious way of looking at time. There's nothing of ourselves about which we can be objective, Pickle said, except our own physical responses. Remember? It's what Dr. Ellers was always saying. Flattery thought back to Ellers, UMB's chief of psych. Pickle is purpose, the force that will give direction to your search, Ellers had said. You have substitutes, of course. Accidents do happen. But you've nothing honed as fine as Bickle. He's a creative discoverer. A creative discoverer. The failures of all who went before him, all of those cloned brothers, all was preparation for this assault on the problem. If we succeed, we survive. If we fail. And Bickle was thinking. Emotion. How do we symbolize it and program for it? What does the body do? We're inside in direct contact with whatever the body's doing. That's the only thing we can really be objective about. What does the body? It has to have a completely interfunctioning body, Bickle said, seeing the whole problem and answer as an abrupt revelation. It has to have a body that's gone through trauma and crisis. He stared at Flattery. Guilt too, Raj. It has to have guilt. Guilt? Flattery asked. and wondered why the suggestion made him feel angry and half fearful. He started to object, conscious of a rhythmic rasping. He thought at first it was a malfunctioning alarm, realized then it was Timberlake. The life systems engineer had reclapsed himself in his action couch cocoon. He was asleep, snoring. He needed some rest. Get some sleep, brother. You got it, brother. Guilt, Pickle said, holding his attention on flattery. How? Prudence asked. In program engineering terms, Pickle said, we must install trapping functions, inner alarm systems, monitors that interrupts operations according to the functional needs of the entire system. Guilt's an artificial emotion. It has nothing to do with consciousness, Flattery objective. Fear and guilt are parent and child. You can't have guilt without fear. You can't have fear without guilt, Flattery said. Can you? Pickle asked, and he thought, it's the Cain and Abel syndrome. Where'd the race pick that one up? Not so fast, Prudence said. Are you suggesting that we make this ox afraid? Yeah. Absolutely not, Flattery said. He had his couch exerciser going on. But shut it off. Turned to stare at Pickle. Our creature already has a large, fast memory, Pickle said. It has fixed memory. If you discount our addressing problems which aren't interfering with function at any rate, and I'll bet that this thing has a protected area of memory that's even ready with illusions when they're necessary, and self-protection. Our creature already has a large, fast memory, Pickles said. It has fixed memory if you discount our addressing problems, which aren't interfering with functioning at any rate. And I'll bet this thing has a protected area of memory that's even ready with illusions when they're necessary for self-protection. But fear, Flattery said. This is the other side of your coin, Raj. You want it to love us? Okay, love is the kind of need, eh? I'm willing to give it a need for external program sources. That's us, you understand? I'll leave the necessary gaps in its makeup that only we can fill. It'll have emotions, but that means an unlimited spectrum of emotions, Raj. The spectrum includes fear. Guilt and fear, Prudence thought. Raj will have to face it. She looked at Bickle, seeing the filmed over withdrawn look in his eyes. Pleasure and pain, Bickle muttered. He focused on Prudence, the sleeping Timberlake, Flattery. Each in turn, did they see that the ox had to be able to reproduce itself too? Self-replicating. Prudence felt her pulse quickening, tore her attention away from Bickle. He put a hand to her temple, checked the pulse. There, related this to her quickened breathing, to her body temperature, to hungers, to stage of fatigue and awareness. The chemical experiments on her body were giving her an accurate awareness of her bodily functions, and that awareness told her she needed chemical readjustment. Well, Raj, Bickle said. Must compose myself, Flattery thought, turning back onto his couch. I must appear natural and calm, his eyes away from the false panel on his repeater board. Under that panel lay death and destruction. On his repeater board, that's where he has the key. Bickle was growing exceedingly alert to the tiniest clues. Flattery marked the quiet green of the flashboard, the ticking of relays through the graph counters. Everything about the ship felt soothing and ordinary, all systems functioning. Yet deep inside himself, Flattery felt knotted up, like an animal poised at the sound of the hunter. Pleasure and pain. Could be done, of course, the gradual orientation toward a goal, then denial, interference, removal, frustration, threat of destruction. I'm going back to the shop, Bickle said. The way to do this is pretty clear, isn't it? Perhaps to you, Flattery said. There's no stopping, Prudence said, and hoped Flattery heard the implication. There's no stopping him. Go ahead, Flattery said. Assemble your blocks of NerveNet simulators, but let us think long and hard before we tie your system into a full computer. He looked at Bickle. Do you still contemplate this black box, white box experiment? Bickle merely stared at him. You know the danger, Flattery said. He's talking about shocking his brain into the computer. Okay, we're at the end. You know the danger, Flattery said. Bickle felt elation, a breakthrough in some inner factor that had resisted him. The ship, its living organisms, its problems, all were like marionettes and marionette toys. The way out was so clear to him. He'd only hinted at it before. So clear. He could see the necessary schematics stacked in his mind, like transparencies piled one on the other. Four-dimensional construction, he reminded himself. We have to construct a net in depth that contains complex world line tracks. It has to absorb non synchronous transmissions. It has to abstract discrete patterns out of the impulse oversend. The important thing is structure, not the material. The important thing is topology. That's the key to the whole damn problem. Prue, give me a hand, Bickle said. He glanced at the chronometer beside the comm central board. Look at Timberlake. Let him sleep. Prue couldn't help. Prue could help. She didn't need electronics work. Surgical in its exactness. Clean and with minimal leads and tight couplings. We're going to need a coupling area for each group of multiple blocks, Pickle said, looking at Prudence. I'm going to turn that job over to you while I build up the major block systems. As though his words had accumulated in her mind, built up a certain pressure until they spilled into the understanding. I already know what I'm going to say. As though his words had accumulated in her mind, built up a certain pressure until they spilled over into understanding, she saw what Bickle intended. He was going to feed a continuous data load into an enormously expanded computer link-up. He was going to project onto the computer. He was going to project into the computer, like a film projected onto a screen, a giant spread out, an almost infinite psychospace. The array required connectives. The array of required connectives set themselves up in her mind, with parallel rows of binary numbers, cross-linked, interwoven, and she saw that she could reframe the problem, overlap it with the matrix function, creating a problem solution array like a multidimensional chessboard. In the instant of this revelation, she realized that Pickle could not have framed his approach to the solution without using the same mathematical crowbar to lever away the heavy work. Used adjacency matrices, she accused. He nodded. She had seen that he was She had seen that he was intruding into a new mathematical conception, a calculus of qualities by which he could trace neuron impulses and juggle them within their embodied psychospaces of the Ox computer. Prudence had begun to see what he saw, but the others weren't ready yet for anything more than hints. The possibilities were staggering. The implied methods would permit constructions of entirely new computers reduced in size and basic complexity by a factor of at least 1,000. But more important was the understanding that this gave him of his own psychospaces and their function in abstraction. The aggregate nerve cell excitation of his own body all the way. But more important was the understanding this gave him of his own psychospaces and their function in abstraction, the aggregate nerve cell excitation of his own body, and the way this was reduced to recognizable values. Thinking within this framework, Bickle saw put him on a threshold, a certain pressure here, a certain application of energy there, and he knew he would be projected into a consciousness that he had never before experienced. The realization inspired fear and awe at the same time in him. The realization inspired fear and awe, and at the same time it lured him. He turned, crossed to the hatch into the shop, opened it, looked back at Flattery. Raj, he said, we're not conscious. What? Huh? It was Timberlake rousing out of his sleep, rubbing his eyes, staring straight out at Bickle. We're not awake, Bickle said. And we're going to leave it there, chat. I'm going to end really quickly because I got to go pee, honestly. We'll see you next time. Bye.